Sorry for the delays I've been having, but here is episode 26 of Task Force X. This time you get 3 character profiles and 3 issues reviewed. Also, this ties in with my 6th episode of the Starman Manhunter Adventure Hour. Issue 6 of Manhunter takes place right before the annual, which is going to be the last issue I talk about this month. So, if you want to know what happened with Mark Shaw prior to the annual, go back and check out my last episode, episode 6 of the Starman Manhunter Adventure Hour for further information. Anyways, enough of that. Let's go ahead and get on with this.
Behold the voice of God.
For those of you who don't know me officially, my name is Amanda Waller.
And I am Aaron Moss, your host of Task Force X.
What, we some kind of suicide squad?
Well, yeah, that and
Checkmate.
Task Force X is a podcast that tells the stories of John Ostrander's Suicide Squad and Paul Kupperberg's Checkmate from the late 80s, early 90s.
I want to build a team of some bad people who can do some good.
And that's what Suicide Squad is. While Checkmate is a team of good people doing some good. My mission here is to chronicle each and every title in all the books that Suicide Squad and Checkmate appeared in during that era.
We're the U.S. government. You're going to start a blog and expose us?
Well, a blog and a headcast, Amanda.
Those scumbags are trying to screw me.
Not at all, Amanda. Just trying to help everyone else discover the joy of the Suicide Squad and Checkmate. Anywho, hope you guys have as much fun with these comics as I did when I first read them, so many years ago.
Mother...
That's enough of that, Amanda. Let's go and start the show.
I didn't believe the stories.
Nobody does. Remember, I'm watching. I see everything.
And welcome back to the 26th episode of Task Force X. Well, this is the second episode of my new opening. I haven't heard from anyone yet, so what do you guys think about it? Let me know. Enough preamble, let's get on with the show. As I said earlier, we have 3 character profiles and 3 comics to talk about, so let's get started. The first character profile we're going to do is Shade, the Changing Man. Yes, you may remember him from last episode and the episode before that when he first appeared, the one I talked about with Ryan about. I was going to do this profile last episode, but due to time constraints and running out of time and all other bull, I didn't get a chance to, so we're going to do Shade this episode. Shade was created by Steve Ditko for DC Comics back in 1977. Later on, Peter Milligan and Chris Bachalo readapted him and brought him in as one of the first Vertigo titles. Important to note that both Shades are distinct from the Shade, which is another DC character. So there's Shade, and then there's a character called The Shade, who appeared in Robinson's Starman. But we're not getting into that Shade. We're going to talk about the original Shade. He was published by DC Comics. His first appearance was Shade the Changing Man, number 1, June of 1977. As I said, he was created by Steve Ditko. Steve, you may know from, he helped create one of the most famous characters over at Marvel, Spider-Man. In-story information on Shade. His alter ego is Rack Shade. Team affiliations, the Suicide Squad, as you're seeing currently. And later on, he shows up in Justice League Dark. Notable aliases, the Mad Mod, Poet God. Abilities, the M-Vest creates a strong force field that repels weaponry, allows a degree of flight, and distorts Shade's appearance dependent on the viewer's mental state or his own. Now for the publishing history, Shade the Changing Man, and again all this information is coming as usual directly from Wikipedia. So if you have any questions about it, question Wikipedia. Unless I know some of it's accurate, some of it I know, a lot of it I'm taking just for Wikipedia's word. If any of you guys are familiar with Shade and have any difference in opinions or comments on this, definitely let me know. As I was saying, Shade, the Changing Man, told the story of a fugitive from the militant planet Meta and another dimension. Shade, whose full name is Rack Shade, was powered by the stolen M-Vest, or Miracle Vest, named for its inventor. which protected him with a force field, enabled him to project the illusion of becoming a large, grotesque version of himself. Shade was the first character that Ditko had created, or helped create, for a mainstream publisher for many years. Prior to rejoining DC Comics, Ditko had worked on characters such as his Mr. A. Shade was very much a return to the mainstream superheroics, though Shade indicated no particular connection with the DC Universe. Although Letters column stated that there was no reason it could not be shown in there, Michael Fleischer scripted the series based on Ditko's plotting and art. His series ran for 8 bi-monthly issues in 1978 before its sudden cancellation in the wake of DC's implosion. A contraction of DC's line that saw about a third of their books axed right before the September release. A 9th extra-length issue featuring the debut of a new Ditko character called the Odd Man was produced, but was published only as part of DC's canceled Comics Cavalcade in 1978. DC's canceled Comic Cavalcade was I think it was like a trade paperback type book that collected a lot of the series that were canceled that had the next issue created, not yet published. They collected them all together for, I think it was copyright reasons. A revised version of the Odd Man appeared in Detective Comics 487. That came out in December of 79, January of 1980. Both stories were published in the Steve Ditko Omnibus, Volume 1, which came out in 2011, which is a hardcover edition of Ditko's DC work. After this, try it again. I'm having a problem speaking as usual. After this, Shade was adopted into the DC Universe and made a brief appearance in the Crisis on Infinite Earths, which happened in 1985, as well becoming a regular character in, yes, you guessed it, the Suicide Squad. Now for a little bit of his, the fictional character's biography. In his own series, Rack Shade was a secret agent of the world in the Meta Zone, a dimension near that of Earth, between which is the Zero Zone, and had been framed for treason and sentenced to death. Through various events, Shade spent some time on Earth trying to clear his name using the retrieved Invest, which had been stolen in the process, but was met with resistance by the Meta authorities at each point. His name was cleared bit by bit, but he remained a wanted man, and Shade continued to use the Invest. Shade's former fiancée, Melou Laurent, wanted to kill him for some time, causing an explosion that crippled her parents, but her parents operated a mechanical monster called the Supreme Decider, or SUD, had other plans. The Medans have an outpost on Earth, which is called the Occult Research Center, ORC. We talked about this a little bit a couple episodes ago when Shade first showed up. The center was run by Wizor, surprise, surprise, assisted by Leto. Melo ran it for a time, his fiancée, or former fiancée, I guess. The orc operates by telling the absolute truth about Meta, something the public tends to laugh off. When Melou desired to kill Shade, the fact that the more violent criminals released in the freak accident during the prison riot that freed Shade became a priority annoys her greatly and causes her to leave the organization. When Dr. Sagan showed Melou the videotape evidence that Shade had rescued her from a deadly part of the Zero Zone called the Area of Madness, from which no one but Shade, thanks to the vest, has exited without expending all their bodily resources screaming, she changes her mind about Shade in spite of having been the one who ultimately captured him. In the final issue, President Olan's hands were tied in regard to the treason charge, even though he considers Shade innocent, but until his death sentence is overturned in court, he is still under a death sentence as Colonel Cross gathers evidence in his defense. With all those on his side, he leaps into the Zero Zone and is swallowed by the Area of Madness. Quickly, and that was all happened during his mini-series. During his series, it was canceled. A quick little note, back when I first started collecting comics, back in the late 80s, early 90s, I had a chance to pick up these 8 issues and read this series. And from what I seem to remember, I seem to remember enjoying this. I don't think I have them any longer. I think I've sold them at some point. I'd have to check my long boxes and see if I still have them. But I think I got rid of it at some point because I needed the money. Back to the show itself. So Shade ends up living in the Area of Madness. The Suicide Squad, after leaving Nightshade's home dimension ends up here, and Shade is able to adjust his invest, so he teleports himself and the squad to Earth. Unfortunately, the Orc has been taken over by Dr. Z and a gang of Medan criminals. They hope to use the place as a base to conquer Earth and eventually Meta itself. Shade's plan to stop them is sidetracked by the crisis on Infinite Earths and being struck back in the Zero Zone. He is eventually rescued by the squad, which we saw just a couple issues or episodes ago. Shade's second attempt at stopping ZZ is successful, though Meta authorities still wish to arrest him. Rick Flag pulls a gun, and Shade is allowed to leave with the squad. Shade, as we've been seeing these last issues, is offered technical help in returning to Meta in exchange for his help on missions. Shade cooperates, though he is not quite sure if Earth's technology is up to the task. More on that this episode. Other versions of Rack. In Kingdom Come, Alex Ross created Shade 3, an African American version. He's referred to as more of the classic heroic version and is visually based more on the Steve Ditko Shade than the Peter Milligan Shade. He also appeared in JLA The Nail as a member of the Outsiders, and he was in Flashpoint. He was art by Andy Kubert. And that was his 2011. He showed up in Flashpoint Secret 7, which was a limited series spin-off of the Flashpoint event crossover. This story is written by Peter Milligan and drawn by George Perez. This version of Shade is visually based on the Vertigo incarnation, but draws elements from the original Steve Ditko iteration of the character as well. As far as collected editions, the original Steve Ditko series is collected in the Steve Ditko Omnibus, published in 2011. And then the Vertigo series is being collected in trade paperbacks. There's 3, I believe, so far. And that's the different version of what we're talking about. And then also more recently, Shade's appearances in the Suicide Squad are being reprinted in the Suicide Squad reprints that are currently coming out. Or the trade paperbacks, sorry. In other media, Shade the Changing Man appears in one of the DC Nation shorts on Cartoon Network, voiced by Benjamin Diskin. And in film, he appeared in Justice League The Flashpoint Paradox. And that's it for Shade the Changing Man. Let's go and quickly move on to our first comic. First comic we're going to look at today is Checkmate number 5. Again, this is another 2-story comic. The first story is entitled The Dallas Connection. This book came out August of 1988. Again, to buy it on stand, you had to be around April the 12th of 1988. The cover price was $1.25, and the editor was Jonathan Pearson. The first story was 16 pages, as usual, written by the amazing Paul Kupperberg, penciled by Steve Irwin, inked by Al Vey, letterer was Albert Tobas de Guzman, colorist Juliana Ferreira, and the cover credits was artist Jerry Bingham. And our synopsis, we start the story with Harry Stein coming into work, bringing his sons with him. He leaves them in his office with his oldest son sulking as he checks in with Harvey Bullock and Jack Wazowski. He finds out that there was a mob hit in Dallas, with one of the men being a member of the Italian mob in Venice, which we saw last issue. A knight named Jake goes to investigate the crime scene. He spies on the prime suspect, a man called M.T. Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh owns half of the businesses in Dallas and runs the other half as the head of one of Dallas's biggest crime families. He goes to his day job, that's Jake, as a newspaper. Try that again. Jake goes to his day job at a newspaper called the Daily Express, where he does some research on Kavanaugh. After printing his information, he leaves to do further investigating, leaving his editor fuming. Jake reports back to his commander, Jack from earlier, and informs him of Kavanaugh's holdings, which Jack already knew of. Jack told him that if he could have informed him of this hours ago, if Jake had bothered to check in. Jake tells Jack, or reverse that, Jack, the boss, tells Jake, the knight, to report to the safe house so they can plan their next move. Jake informs him that he's already following somebody. He disconnects to follow a suspect, leaving Jack fuming. Jake confronts Dan Allen, president of Inner Air and one of Kavanaugh's oldest and shadiest friends. He takes Dan's bodyguards out and then tells Stan that he wants a cut of the action of the arms shipment. After Jake flees, Stan reports to Kavanaugh about the confrontation. Stan and Kavanaugh discuss their plans and talks about an airstrip that Jake is able to listen into as he planted a bug on Stan during the confrontation. Jake reports back to Jack about his findings, and Jack tells him not to do anything else until they talk. Jake says they'll catch him first thing in the morning and disconnects, leaving Jake fuming. Between Jake and Jack, I get confused here. He disconnects, leaving Jack fuming and wondering if all knights have a death wish. He then goes to Kavanaugh's office and finds plans for an air landing facility. As Jake tries escaping, he's confronted by 3 security guards who ends up knocking him out after a little fight. Jack tells Henry that he's lost contact with one of the knights, and Harry tells him to stay in contact as he mentally berates himself for trying to be daddy and spy at the same time. Meanwhile, Apon happens to be doing his own investigation into some stolen weapons. He stows aboard a truck with stolen gun as he activates his homing beacon to call in for help. Back with Jake, he awakens to find himself staked to a field, spread eagle, with Kavanaugh, the assassin from last issue, and a couple of goons over him. One of the goons, named Billy Ed, tries removing the knight's mask and gets himself shocked for the efforts. The assassin confirms that this is the same guy he tangled with, as all knights look alike in the armor. Is that racist? Anyways, Kavanaugh tells Jake how he loads the arms into a dummy compartments in the planes, takes them to Europe or the Middle East, and unloads them. As the pawn slips out of the back of the truck, Jake finds that a cargo plane is landing, using him as his landing strip. The pawn sees this, decides he needs to help save the knight. Meanwhile, the knight pops out his wrist knife that we've seen previously and starts cutting through the ropes that's holding him down. Kavanaugh and his men see this, and they go back to stop him from escaping. The pawn starts sniping the men, giving the knight covering fire. He then pulls out a rocket launcher and shoots the plane, damaging it and causing it to veer off the runway into the store of arms, which promptly explodes. As the assassin comes to kill Jake, the cavalry arrives, causing the assassin to flee. Jack tells Jake that he's lucky that he had upon working another matter that led to him. Jake replies, "Well, at least I ended the job with a bang. Texan style. Yeehaw!" The end of this story. Now for my thoughts on it. As usual, we'll start with the cover. We see basically a scene from the interior of the book that I mentioned earlier. We see a huge cargo type plane coming down a runway. Staked to the ground is the knight. He's got one arm free and he's reaching for the other one as the plane barrels down on him. This is, while not an actual page from the comic, it's a scene from the comic. I mean, we do have the scene of the plane coming down, the knight staked down trying to get away. And again, on this picture here, or this image, you can see where the stakes are driven to the ground. The ground's cracked around it like it would be in real life. There's just a little, and again, this is a very, 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 very minor nitpick. There where one of his feet is right behind the stake, looks a little off. I don't know if it's just my eyesight or what, but other than that very minor little nitpick, the foot looks a little off there. It's a great image. We've got the sunlight shining off of his armor. You can see the knight's eyes, kind of in terror almost, or I can imagine it's in terror, is what it looks like to me, as he sees the plane coming down as he's trying to reach for the other stake to pull himself free. It's a great cover. It lets you know what's going on in the story. It shows the knight's costume, which I've said every time I've talked about Checkmate. I love the knight's design. Fabulous. Let's move on to the story itself. So Harry is a single father. He's got the boys. He's taking them to work with him. He's trying to be secret agent man. He's trying to be father. Speaking of someone that was a single father for a while, it can be hard to juggle 2 boys and a job, let alone a job as a secret agent in charge of protecting the world's security. So I feel for Harry Stein here. While I didn't have as rough as him because my job wasn't that hard compared to Harry's, I see where the man's coming from, and I feel his pain. His oldest son, it looks like probably a young teenager, is sulking that, daddy's taking him to work with him and not spending time with him. Again, I see both points of view. I mean, I know where his son Matthew's coming from. Matt just wants to spend time with daddy. He wants his daddy's love, but his dad needs to work. So it's a catch-22 for poor Harry. I see where they're both coming from, and I understand it's a real-life situation that happens to, I don't know however many single fathers are out there that work, but it's a real thing that happens every day to fathers all over the world. Even not single fathers that are married, but as a father, you still got to work, you still got to bring in money, you still got to hold down the fort. So sometimes having kids and having a job can be a bit of a pain. Also, having young kids and trying to be a podcaster can be a bit of a pain. But anyway, so we move on to the story. We see Harvey Bullock, which again, as I've mentioned before, is star of Fox's Gotham. And we see another man, Jack Wisnowski. And basically they're just getting caught up, tying us into last issue and setting us up for this issue. Again, Harry's not going to play a big part this issue. As far as the leader, or the guy in charge of the mission, it's going to be Jack. I always didn't have Jake and Jack together. I keep getting the two confused. It's going to be Jack. He's going to be in charge of the mission itself. And again, not much more to say about the next couple pages. I've covered that in the synopsis. We meet Kavanaugh. He's your average Texan, I guess you could say. I mean, he's got the plaid shirt on, the big belt buckle, the leather jacket probably, the bolo tie, the big cowboy hat. In fact, most of his people here, one guy's got a baseball cap, but the other buddies of his all have cowboy hats on. You can say it's very stereotypical of a Texan, but stereotypes exist for a reason. I talked about that in an older Head Speaks podcast, which I'm not going to get into here, but we see Jake watching Kavanaugh as he's talking about his buddies and talking about a new airstrip. And then we see that Jake, the knight, has a day job at the Dallas Express. And basically, you can tell from the people here talking that Jake doesn't spend a lot of time in the office. His editor's giving him grief about it. You ever hear of a telephone, Jake? It's that shiny thing. Numbers on the front. You're supposed to use it to check with your boss. And as we're going to find out, as I mentioned in the synopsis, Jake's not a real big guy on checking in with any of his bosses. And his boss, his editor here, is watching as Jake pulls up information on Kavanaugh. We see he's doing a search for MT Kavanaugh. Account search, Kavanaugh Industries. Gives some reference numbers. His boss questions what's going on. He's like, why are you looking up Kavanaugh? And he's like, nothing. Let me see what it says. Hey, Kavanaugh? What'd you want with Kavanaugh, Jake? Nothing. Let the Express sued. Who's talking sued? Did I mention sued? Look, pal. You know Kavanaugh, he's not going to bother suing you, if you know what I mean. And as I mentioned earlier in the synopsis, Kavanaugh owns half of the city as one of the leader of the mobs in the town. So, but not necessarily mobs, but the crime families in Dallas. So, the editor here, he's basically saying that if Jake looks too far into Kavanaugh, they're not worried about getting sued. Jake may come missing. May find himself, talking with the fishes, as it were. And he takes off, leaving his editor upset. And as I said, he's fuming. And like he's taking some antacid or something. It looks like he's got a bottle popping out like 4 or 5 tablets. I'm thinking they're antacids. He's like, story? What do I know about any stories in the paper? I'm only the editor. So again, it's kind of a funny little scene there. And then Jake checks in with Jack finally, and Jack tells you, he's like, "You don't sound so surprised tonight. You would have known all this hours ago if you'd bothered to answer your comm link." He's like, "I'm in Dallas now, so expect to run this operation according to procedure. Come in the safe house and we'll discuss strategy." And Jake's like, "That's a little difficult." As we see he's on top of a huge, looks almost like a water tank covered with lights or balls or something. I'm assuming they're lights because when we get a closer look at Jake hanging off one of the beams, it looks like there's lights on it. So it looks like a huge oval or circular diner on top of stilts almost, with a bunch of lights on the outside. It's an interesting look. Jake's climbing on the outside of the building as he's watching a man and a woman get up to leave. The man's pinning the coat on the woman as the elevator arrives, and Jake pops down from the elevator through that opening that's in all elevators and all the movies and comic books and what have you. He leaps down, takes out the bodyguards as the door shuts, pops out his little gun from that little hidey holster we've seen before, I believe. And basically tells this guy, Stan, actually I think it was his last name. No, that's his first name, Stan Allen. That he's going to need protection from me and by me, understand? And Stan's like, "I don't think you understand, boy. You're not dealing with amateurs here." I like his, Jake's trying to make Stan think that he's mostly on their territory, trying to take protection money, which we find out later his main purpose here is just to plant a bug on him. Again, it's the artwork in this book overall, especially this issue here in particular, it's very nice artwork. I really like it. I've said that before, I'll say it again. I love the nice design. The facial features, there's a page here on, it's not numbered. I'm guessing it's probably page 8, it looks like. When Jake gets done threatening Stan, the woman that's with Stan tells him, "Leave him alone, you got no right." You can see the fury on her face. And then a couple pounds later, you see the relief as Jake runs away and the security finally catches up with him. And then here at the bottom of this page, we find Kavanaugh talking with Stan. Stan's filling him in. And we see that there's a bug as Jake's sitting in his car listening. Again, some people would complain about invasion of privacy. I'm of two minds on that. I mean, yes, a person should have their privacy, but then when it comes to criminals and people like what we're dealing with in the story, it makes the whole invasion of privacy thing seem kind of silly when yes, they're invading someone's privacy, but they're doing so to protect the security of America. So, I mean, it's kind of a catch-22. Is Jake wrong for bugging him and listening in to his private conversations? Oh, yeah, but he's going to be able to stop him from doing some harm. So, you can't really fault a man there. And again, he reports into Jack and tells him what's going on. He says he's going to check out this on his own. And Jack's like, "Negative. If you do anything else, we need to talk." He says, "Roger, control. I'll catch you first thing in the morning. Night out." Which, again, as I said, leaves Jack kind of fuming. He's not quite so mad here, but he's kind of perturbed that Jake's not listening to, I was going to say reason, not listening to the boss. He's doing what he thinks he needs to do. And again, we've seen this over in Suicide Squad, or maybe that's the show we talk about now. Sometimes these stories run together. I think it was the last issue where, or maybe it is this issue. Oh, we'll find out. Anyways, but in that issue I'm thinking about, Rick's talking to Waller. Waller tells him to report back into base, and he's like, "Oh, what? Continue with the mission?" Yeah, it was last. It was the first issue of the Jihad Return. So, yes, it was last issue, which was last episode. Sorry about that whole little mental run around on the air. But it reminds me of last episode of Suicide Squad where Waller's telling Flag to report back to Bel Rev, let the local authorities handle it, and Flag ignores her, and basically, he's like, what? We should stop them because it's the right thing to do. They're our responsibility. You got it, boss. Basically, Jake's doing the same thing here. He's like, Roger, control. I'll catch you first thing in the morning. Night out. So the Knight breaks into Kavanaugh's office, and he finds plans for an airstrip. And since they've been talking about an airstrip, he assumes this is what they're referring to. Apparently there's an electronic eye inside the filing cabinet, and when he removed it set off a sensor at the security desk, which sent the guards out to him. And again, tell you how tough these guys are. It takes 3 of them to take the Knight out, and the only reason they do so is because I've talked about the Knight's costume. You can see the Knight's eyes through the visor, usually, when it plays best for the story. I mean, in the first issue, you couldn't really see his eyes because if you did, you could tell he's a black guy, which might kind of ruin the story, or not really the story, but kind of if the bad guy could see his eyes through the mask in that first issue, it would kind of lessen the impact of later on when the supremacist guy is complaining about black people doing this and niggas doing that and this and that, and the Knight pulls his sleeve back, showing that he's actually a brother himself. So sometimes you can see their eyes in the eye hole, sometimes you can't. It depends on how it plays out for the story. Here, again, we don't really need to see his eyes, but there is an opening, and a guard picks up some sand and throws it, which gets it into his eyes. So if you want to think that that's one kind of design flaw in the Knight costume, is that the visor's got that opening. If there was some glass or something in there, a screen or something, it would have protected the Knight's eyes. But again, for the story's sake, it needed to happen. They could have still got him down. But anyways, I'm kind of rambling. That's how they got him down, threw some sand in his eyes, blinded him, and then they proceeded to beat the tar out of him. And then we get Jack reporting to Harry at Koning Industries in Shelby, Virginia, and Harry is kind of berating himself. As I said, he's trying to play father, he's trying to be super spy, and again, as I've said previously, it's kind of hard to be daddy, especially if you're a single father, 2 boys. Again, I was in that position myself. Again, I wasn't head spy of a secret spy organization, but just as a working dad, I definitely know how Harry feels. You feel you're laying your kids down by not spending enough time with them, but the work's got to get done. So I definitely feel for Harry in these stories. And then we go to a Dallas armory where we find a pawn is sneaking aboard a truck that's got some stolen arms in it. And this whole time call for help when he activates his beeper. This will play back later in the story. And then we cut, as I said, we got the Knight from the cover staked out on the ground. And we get this one guy, Billy Ed, definitely a stereotypical Texan name. He's got a pair of sunglasses on and a Cowboys t-shirt. Meanwhile, there's 2 good old boys, one of them being Kavanaugh with a gun around his waist, and both guys have cowboy hats. And then we get our buddy from last episode, which I told you that I couldn't remember if it came back up or not. It comes right back. The assassin, he's sitting here in his fedora. And as I was saying, so Billy Ed tries to pull the mask off, and he gets a big zap. And again, I like this look here. Again, these pages aren't numbered, so I'm guessing by looking, it's probably page 12, I'm thinking. About halfway down, we get the page of Billy Ed trying to pull the mask off, and he gets zapped for his trouble. And so Kavanaugh asks the assassin, he's like, according to my friend here, you've also been causing my associates trouble in Italy. And the assassin guy's like, He's the one, all right. And again, as I said, he's got to be assuming that this night's the same night that bugged him last issue, because the costume's the same. But if I remember right, the guy from last issue, I want to say was an Irish guy, and this night we've seen isn't. So maybe there's a voice modulator in the suit. I don't recall. I don't think they've said yet. And I don't recall if they mentioned later, but it must be a voice modulator or something, so they all sound the same. Because you got the Irish guy and you got this guy, which they probably don't sound very much alike. But seeing how the assassin from last issue thinks that this is the same guy, tells me that maybe they got a voice modulator to make their voice sound the same. And then we get Kavanaugh doing the typical supervillain spiel. I've got the superhero pinned down, so now I'm going to tell him my plans and what I'm doing, which is basically shorthand to clue the reader in on what's going on. And also to confirm to our hero that yes, you are dealing with a bad guy, you're free to take him out. And then we get the scene from the cover almost. Again, as it's not the exact scene, the plane's further up in the air. Actually, I guess the scene that I'm referring to comes a bit later. But this little part here where the knight's staked out and he's on a landing field and the plane is going to land on him. Kind of interesting way to kill somebody. And then we get the pawn. He's thinking about, well, do I blow my cover? Do I save the knight? Do I stay where I'm at and not save the knight, but keep my cover? And again, he realizes the best thing to do is that he needs to help the knight out no matter what it means. So as he's preparing to do so, as I said, the knight pops his little knife out of his wrist gauntlets, cuts through the rope with one of his hands on his right hand, and Kavanaugh says, he's got a knife. I would comment about them not searching him very well, but with all the compartments and spring-loaded things on this suit, and especially seeing how Billy Ed got the piss shocked out of him, trying to take off the helmet, probably afraid to search him too much. So they go back to try to stop him. As I said, the pawn realizes the knight needs a delaying action, so he starts shooting to keep Kavanaugh and his men down. And actually, it looks like not only just keeping him down, but it looks like one of the bullets does. I think I missed this previously. One of the bullets does hit his buddies. It looks like we see his hat flying off, and then we get the scene at the from the cover. We get the knight, he's snapping one of the ropes. He sees the plane coming at him. Plane's not quite, again, it's not quite the scene from the cover. Plane's not quite on the ground yet, but it's coming pretty close. And then, luckily, there's a bunch of ammunition laying around. The pawn pulls out a grenade launcher, and he says he can try to blow out one of the landing gears. As he does so, he gets hit. It blows up. It looks like it's just the wing, where the engine and everything's at, which caused the plane to veer off course, which makes sense because that one engine's blown, so the other propeller's still flying, or still spinning, which caused them to go off course. And luckily, for the sake of the story, the pilot drives right into the ammunition, which causes the whole thing to explode. Again, the assassin shows up. He says, I should have killed you when I had the chance in Venice. I'm not going to make that same mistake twice, though we know that it doesn't really matter. If he would have killed the knight then, Jake still would be here to be causing a problem now. It's just they would know it's a different guy, or maybe they would think he didn't do his job right. I don't know. But before you take him out, this guy's beat up. He's got some schmuck on his face. His glasses are broke. And all of a sudden, 3 helicopters show up and start shooting at him. He ducks back into the wreckage and the fire of the plane, and they will get away. And then we get as I said, the comment about Jake saying that he ended it with a bang, Texan style. Again, good story. The only thing it leaves me questioning is how badly was the pawn hit. We see the pawn get hit in the shoulder, the arm it looks like. He says, I'm hit. But we don't see him after that. We don't see... Was he too close to... Did he get caught in the explosion? Did he die? Is he still alive? Maybe we'll see him later on. That's the only real question that the story really leaves you, is what happened to that pawn. But again, seeing how he's a pawn, maybe no one cares. But again, that's the end of that story. Now let's go ahead and cover the second story in the book. The second story. This was an 8-page story called The Dome. Again, written by Paul Kupperberg, penciled by Art. And again, I've heard the guy's name pronounced different ways. The penciler, his name is Art T-Bear or Thibert, something like that. Inker is Alve. Letter is Bob Lappin. Color is Juliana Frietter. And the synopsis for this story, we continue our story of Reed, which was the pawn from the first story arc. Reed is going through his training in the Danger Room, or whatever Checkmate calls it. I guess they call it the Dome. We also get some flashbacks of his early life. Throughout the story, we basically find out that Reed has always been a grandstander, always clowning around. Many of his adventures he survives through just dumb luck. Reed completes the course with a near perfect score. Again, it was just a small 8-page story. That's all there is really to it. Now for my thoughts on this story. Again, overall, it was a good story. I'm enjoying these little backup stories, if you will. We're seeing Reed, who we got to know as a pawn, make his way up. He was inducted last issue. This issue, where he's doing some training. Again, the costume in here, it's different than your regular night costume. It's a black and white costume, or maybe it's dark blue. I'm not quite sure. I think it's supposed to be black and white. One side's black, the other side's one leg, and up through his upper torso has like a knight's a picture like a horse, which I believe is supposed to imply a knight, since this is based on chess moves or chess pieces. And this costume has one up on the knight's regular vision costume. Is that the where his eyes are at? He's got actually got goggles. We can see the glass in it. So again, as I talked about in the main story, Jake could have definitely used some lenses in his costume this issue. And so they're running him through the Danger Room program, as I called it. One of the technicians asks if he wants to do the standard program, and the gal running it tells him that no, let's give Mr. Reed a workout. Because again, Reed is a bit of a smart aleck. It's being ran by a lady named Ms. Campbell. So since he's been a bit of a smart aleck, she says we're going to ramp it up a little bit and get him a workout. And again, as I said, throughout the story, we find out that he was on the football team. And again, he was a grandstander. His coach is yelling him to pass the ball, but he's just running with it. And we find out that they weren't able to score, which, since everyone's yelling at him, I'm assuming they lost, because he wouldn't pass. He's one of these overeager, one of these ball hogs, if you will, didn't want to pass to his teammates. Some people get away with that because they're really good. Reed, while he may be good, he's not great, and it didn't work out for him, it sounds like. His father's yelling at him at home, telling the teacher says he's bright. All he does is fool around in class, and apparently he's not getting good grades because of him. Always just wanting to screw around. Then we see he's in the military. His sergeant's dressing him down. He's wearing sunglasses, and just like his dad, the sergeant's telling him, when are you going to grow up? Same thing his coach said. It's an ongoing thing with Reed. And then we're back in the Danger Room, and guns are popping up. And as I mentioned, he trips over his own feet, which makes he misses the fire that shoots out at him. He talks about he's getting dumb luck, and he flashes back to his first CIA assignment in Berlin. Again, he escaped through dumb luck. Hey, again, you got to wonder if he's got a dumb luck power or something, kind of like the Black Cat or something, but over Marvel. But again, like I said, there's not much really with this story. It just gets back some about Reed's background, find out he was a screw up. He's very lucky. And again, the story ends. He gets almost near perfect score. overall, like I say, it's good art. It's a good short little story. I mean, nothing fantastic about the story, but it's a good story. It gives a little more background on Reed, which tells me that, again, I forget because it's been 20 years, but I believe Reed's going to be a major character, so we'll see what happens. But that's it for this story. Hold on just 1 second, kids.
Now we're gonna have a break. Message time we're gonna take.
It's midnight, the podcasting hour. Hello, listeners. It's your friend PJ Frightful. That's PJ as in podcast jockey, and I'm dropping dreadful new episodes every 2 weeks. When the clock strikes midnight, the podcasting hour shines a candle on the dark corners of DC Comics. Those supernatural sagas of Swamp Thing, Deadman, the Spectre, and more. The podcasting hour. It's a rotating anthology series boasting the terrifying talents of Ryan Daly, Rob Kelly, Paul Hicks, Ben Avery, Doug Zawisza, and other unfortunate souls. Prepare for the unexpected, open a doorway to nightmare, and enter the houses of mystery and secrets. The moon is full, and the dark spirits are rising. For it's midnight, the podcasting hour. Coming this Halloween, part of the Fire and Water Podcast Network. Beware.
Oh yeah. Feels good. The time has come to enjoy myself. I've left my problems up.
Hello, sweetie.
My name is Aaron Moss. But my friends, they just call me Head. I have a question. Do you enjoy Firestorm, The Atom, G.I. Joe, and other comic books? How about Star Wars, superhero movies, role-playing games, or books? Well, you know what? I love them all. And you know why? I'm a giant geek with an addiction. I have a Green Lantern ring, a Green Lantern power battery, a bat signal, along with other geeky items. I also have over 20 long boxes out in my garage, collecting about 20 years worth of comics. Come, join me the second week of every month as I talk about all things geeky and try to deal with my addiction. Also, for the next little while, I'll be reviewing the comics of my favorite hero, the Atom.
Superhero scientist Ray Palmer, trapped at 6 inches tall in the Amazon rainforest, the Sword of the Atom.
I'm going to start with the Sword of the Atom miniseries and one-shots, then review the Power of the Atom series, which will eventually tie in with one of my other shows, Task Force X. Where can you find this podcast, you may ask? Why, I'm at head.headspeaks.com. I can also be found on iTunes under Headspeaks and on Stitcher Radio at Stitcher.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Google+, both under Headspeaks. Also, look for the Headcast Network, where all of my great shows can be found under one convenient feed. Come, take a look. This podcast is not endorsed nor affiliated with Kid and Play. That would be pretty cool, huh? Anyways, I'll let Kid and Play take us out.
We go back to the fun. Message time is over and done.
And now we're going to jump right into Suicide Squad number 18, entitled Manhattan Massacre. This is a continuation from last month's story. The cover date on this was October of 1988. But again, to buy this fresh off the newsstand, you had to have $1, and you had to be around on July 5th of 1988 to get it fresh off the presses. The editor was Robert Greenberger, writer the fantastic and wonderful John Ostrander, penciler Luke McDonnell, inker Robert Lewis, letterer Todd Klein, colorist Carl Gafford. And the cover credits on this bad boy is the penciler Joe Rosowski, and inker is Carl Kiesel. And the synopsis from Mike's Amazing World of Comics. Rick Flag leads the Suicide Squad to New York City, where members of the Jihad are staging attacks. The team splits up to deal with individual threats. Flag himself locates Rustum, who is using his fire sword to snap cables of a bridge leading to Manhattan. When the bridge gives way, both Flag and Rustum fall into the river. Vixen heads for Grand Central Station, where a child named Badb has killed dozens of people by using her power of manipulation to manipulate their emotions. Vixen herself falls victim to the attack, but the timely aid of Nightshade helps to do the child. Jakuli, the female speedster from previously, is murdering people on Fifth Avenue. Deadshot is dispatched to kill her. The Duchess also kills a new version of Manticore near the Lincoln Tunnel. The Bronze Tiger protects the mayor from Ravan, who is using exoskeleton after his back was broken during their first meeting. The Tiger destroys the power source of the exoskeleton, leaving Ravan immobile. He believes Ravan can be used in the Suicide Squad. Elsewhere, Captain Cold handles a fire thrower named Agni. He encases the terrorist in a block of solid ice. Shade battles a group of death people animated by Kuleshi, the Deathless. After destroying the devices, turning the people into zombies, he wonders if Kuleshi is also destroyed. Finally, Captain Boomerang is dropped off atop the World Trade Center to fight an electronic djinn named Ifriti. He quickly discovers that the creature has the mind of the DC Squad member, Mindboggler, from the first issue of Suicide Squad. She blames Captain Cold for letting her die. Again, the first 2 issues of Suicide Squad. Flag returns after losing Rustum in the river. He managed to get the control device from the Jihad leader to shut down Ifrit. As usual, let's start with the cover as I begin my synopsis of this story. The cover shows Ravan, hope I'm pronouncing that right, and Bronze Tiger fighting. It says Ravan versus Bronze Tiger in the fight of their lives. Dun dun dun. Okay, I added the dun dun dun. Again, we see they're fighting. We see Ravan's in his exoskeleton. It looks like he's just punched Bronze Tiger. And from Bronze Tiger's face, it looks like it hurt like heck. Again, there's no background on this cover. It's just explosive lines flashing out of the background. I like this cover. It's very nice. And then move on to the story itself. Again, as I said, it's continued from last month's story. We've got the team en route in a helicopter. I'm assuming it's Sheba. Flag is giving them their mission briefing and telling them what's going on. What they know at this point is that reports of creatures resembling the Jakuli and the Manticore are attacking Fifth Avenue and Lincoln Tunnel. He assigns Deadshot to attack Jakuli, and this next scene right here, I really like this next couple panels. So as I said, he assigns Deadshot to take out Jakuli, and he assigns Captain Boomerang to attack Ifrit at the World Trade Center. And Boomerang's like, hold on, Colonel. If it is Jakuli, why not send me? I've done it last time. And again, we got a reference here to Suicide Squad 2 when the Jod first appeared in those first 2 issues, and Boomerang fought Jakuli. And so he's like, hey, you fought him before. I fought him before. Why don't I do it again? And Flag's like, your record against super speed characters isn't great. Boomer Butt's all, hold on, I'm plugging my reputation. Flag, like, your record stinks for itself. Deadshot goes. I really like that little interaction between them. Captain Boomerang thinks he's better than he actually is, and Flag just calls him, you know what? You don't do very good against super speed characters, so to heck with you. And as we'll find out, as I covered in the synopsis, it's kind of fitting that he goes up against Ifrit in this one, since he's the one that caused Mindboggler to get killed, which led her to become Ifrit. And Flag finishes dividing up the mission, and Bronze Tiger's like, you're going for Rustum, right? And Flag's like, if I can find him, and if I do, there won't be a third meeting. So Flag's very determined to stop Rustum and stop the entire Jihad before they kill anyone else. And then we cut over to Kentucky, where Nightshade is in a jet, and the pilot's telling her that they're pulling Mach 2, and they don't know how they're going to get New York to do any time, because it's going to take too long to get from where they're at to New York, and she's just like, I know a shortcut. And she opens up a giant hole that the plane flies through and immediately arrives over New York, and the pilot's got sweat on his brow, and he's like, lady, I don't know what that place was or how you took us there, but for the love of God, don't ever do that again. So I like this. That guy's like terrified of the nightshade dimension that he went through. And he's like, I won't ever again. So it looks like in this one little panel here on page 3, she's kind of vowing never to use her powers to go to the nightshade dimension again. And I'm assuming it's just all due to her adventures there, if you will, and her brother dying and everything that happened, as we talked about on our 24th episode with Ryan Daly. But and again, this was the first time we really got a good chance. She showed up last issue. She told Waller she was going. She was in her new costume, and now she's here. So we haven't really gotten much of Nightshade since then. So we'll find out in the next couple issues, I'm sure, a little bit more about what's going on with her. And then again, so we get to the on page 4, Boomerang's dropped off the top of the World Trade Center. The building's on fire. And Boomerang's complaining, oh, beauty, last out again. Why didn't you let me off the front door and let me work my way up? Yeah, it was a crappy Australian accent, sorry. But, he's like, why don't you drop me off front and I can work my way up to the, Ifrit. And Flag calls Boomerang. He's like, on his stupidity, he's like, because you duck out. Because he knows that if he would have dropped Boomerang off the ground floor without being closely monitored, Boomerang would have skipped town and not done what he needed to do. This way, if he drops him on the roof, the way to get out is to fight his way out. And hopefully he can take out Ifrit on his way out. And Boomerang's all, you bloody gala. Hope you die and go to stinking hell, Flag. And again, I had to look up. Again, at the time I didn't really worry too much about what a gala is. I was just gala. I just assumed it was some sort of Australian slang. Now that I'm reading these stories, I have access to the internet at my fingertips. I decided to look up and see what a galag is. And it's also, apparently it's known as the rose-breasted cockatoo. It's the most common and widespread cockatoos, and it can be found in open country in almost all parts of mainland Australia. So basically he's calling him a bird of some sort, a cockatoo. It seemed a little more recursive before I looked up what the word means. I don't know. But again, it's just Captain Boomerang. And then immediately following that panel, we see a close-up of Ifrit saying, you, I know you. You stood by and let them kill me, you. And, you see the shock and the horror on Ifrit, a.k.a. Mindboggler's face. And then Boomerang's all, oh, bugger. And you see the look of fear and dread on his faces. Well, I say, as we know from the first 2 issues of Suicide Squad that I covered earlier in my podcast, Boomerang could have saved Mindboggler, but he chose to let her die because she smarted off and she made him see, things that scared him just because he was a bit of a bastich. And so that was kind of his revenge. So now this is their first meeting. This is issue 18. 16 issues later, about a year and a half after he let her die, he's meeting her back up for the first time since then. So, again, interesting. And then, like I said in the synopsis, Flag finds Rustum on the bridge, cutting the cables in half with his lightsaber, his flaming sword. He tries shooting at him. Rustum throws one of his swords at the helicopter, making it explode. See now, like I said, I'm assuming this probably isn't Sheba, the helicopter at this point, since 1, doesn't look like Briscoe's flying it, and 2, it explodes rather beautifully. But Rick Flag jumps out. The panel here on page 6, when he's jumping out, it's looks like he's falling and he's shooting at the same time. The way the panels are drawn, it's a little hard to see what's going on here. You see flag facing one way, the next panel is facing another way, his gun's going off. It's like a lot of these newer movies when they do fight scenes. They do, and again, I'm blaming on bad choreography. They do a lot of close-up fights to the fighters. So you can't see exactly what's going on with it. It's kind of what's going on here. Somehow, Rick falls out of the helicopter, and it looks like it's a decent way up. And next thing we know, he's on the bridge. Again, I don't know how. Maybe the helicopter's not as high as it seemed, or I'm not sure. That's one of the I don't know if that's weak points in this issue. It's one of the bad parts of this issue, I guess we can say, if the issue has any bad points, is that this here, when Flag gets thrown out of the helicopter because it explodes, being that close to an exploding helicopter, landing on the bridge, it seems like he'd be hurt worse than he actually appears to be. Again, this is on page 6. If you guys have any other thoughts, or maybe yo prizes for this or something, or no prizes. I'm trying not to use no prize. Anyways, if you guys have any other thoughts on what happened here, definitely let me know, because I'm curious what you guys think. But moving off the story, Rustum cuts to the other bridge. The bridge starts collapsing. They fall. And then we see Vixen. She's fighting. She's going up against Badaba, whatever her name is, the child. And I like this. So she comes in. This here's on page 8. I really like when these pages are numbered. It makes it easier to talk about them. So she finds this one on the ground and laying there. And there's a bunch of people on the ground hurt, dead. She has cerebral hemorrhages on some, heartburst on others. Others were beaten to death. And this woman's like, the child. And Vixen, not knowing what's going on, going into this blind, thinks that this woman's talking about her own child that's in danger. And so she's like, stay still. Do not worry. I'll do all my power to save your child. And she quickly moves on before the woman can finish her statement. And the woman, as Vixen walks away, the woman's like, no. You don't understand. Problem is the child. And so she comes upon Badad standing amidst a bunch of dead bodies. And again, not knowing what's going on, Badad got her back to Vixen. Vixen's like, shh, little one, don't be afraid. I'm a friend, come to help you. And Badad just turns around and starts laughing, kind of like you'd see in the old Joker stories, as Vixen tries to cover her ears. So you know that Badad's taking her toll, her using her power on Vixen. And then we're back to and apparently these are zombies. Are a little more, now we switch, we got more of them. They're mind-controlled zombies, if you will. And the Shade's going up against them. And usually, like I talked about in his character profile, his vest can distort his view depending on moods of others. And apparently, since they're dead, there was nothing for the vest to pick up on. And that's how I figured out that they're all dead, because his vest isn't picking up any reading off of them. So there's nothing for the vest to do. And so they start attacking Shade, and they try to put one of the devices on him. We see her at the bottom of the page. And the guy sees like, welcome to the army of Koshaj, the Deathless. And then we cut from that. Again, just like if you're watching a TV show, the action's going on, the hero's in danger, we cut away to a commercial or something. And we see the Manticore destroying cars. His Duchess comes leaping over, firing away. Yeah! That's a great scene right there. Manticore throws a car at her. She hits him in the face with the gun. Unloads full fire in the Manticore's face, which killed him last time. This time, not so much. It knocks him down, but the Manticore starts to get back up again. And Duchess comments, so the Master's fixed your design flaw, huh? Which with high explosives. And she pulls out a rocket launcher or something that looks like a giant gun and shoots at the tunnel. Water comes pouring out on both of them. And then we cut to the home of Gracie Mansion. Not the home of, we cut to Gracie Mansion, the home of Mayor of New York, where Raven is about ready to kill him. He's got his Garrett in his hand. And like here on page 12, we see the outside of Gracie Mansion. We see the mayor. The next panel down, we see a close-up of the mayor's neck and upper arm with Ravan walking behind it with his Garrett in his hand. Garrett? How do you pronounce that? The next panel down, Ravan's a bit closer. Bronze Tiger's behind him. And again, they do a little fight. And Ravan says, "This time I'll break your back." Bronze Tiger's like, "And how is it you're walking?" And as he says it, Bronze Tiger realizes it must be an exoskeleton. Power source is on his person. Because again, this is the late 80s. So he's got to have a power source located on him. And as they're talking here, we can see the mayor, I'm assuming, running off in the background. I'm assuming because it's the only person we saw. Here it looks like the guy has a bit more hair than the mayor did in the previous picture, but it's just a silhouette, a shadow of him. So we'll let it go with that. And again, once Bronze Tiger realizes it's an exoskeleton, it's rather easy. In fact, on this picture here at the top, you can pretty much see where the power source probably is. There's a huge pack, or not a huge, but good sized pack that one of the gauntlets, the wires to the exoskeleton is going to. Bronze Tiger just hits it and shorts it out, and Ravan falls down, and he's like, "Damn you to 1,000 hells." And Bronze Tiger's got Ravan's hands behind his back, saying, "Refrain from damning me while I tell you how you may serve Kali better with another group." So at this point, he looks like he's trying to recruit Ravan to the Suicide Squad, which, I mean, they've used worse people, so what the heck. And again, I mentioned earlier that I thought this was the same Jaculi from the first two issues. Per the notes, and I mean, not the notes, but the comments here, it looks like it's a new Jaculi, even though she looks like the same one to me from earlier, but again, it's been a while since I've read it, so I could be mistaken on that. But as Deadshot's watching, he makes a comment. He's like, "Same as the original, burst super speed up to 3 seconds, stop, throw another burst of super speed." So he's kind of outlining that this is a new one and how her power works. And how she starts running. Deadshot's like, "Hey, Bimbette, over here. I'd like a date. What are your rates?" And she's like, "American pig," and she throws her javelins at him. He shoots her in the knee and just kneecaps her. She's laying there bleeding. He's like, "Kill me, American, or I'll be back for you." Deadshot takes one out to look at her, and the next one he's like, "I believe you." Blam! And she's laying there dead, her eyes just staring out into space. Most of your superheroes, once you stop the bad guy, kneecap him, whatever, they'd be hesitant about killing an unarmed person, especially a woman. Fortunately for us, Deadshot is not a hero, and he has no such compulsions about killing. So, he feels best to kill this person, he's going to kill him. And that's what he does here. So, Jaculi, next time we see her, or him, will definitely be a different person. And then we see Captain Cold battling Agni, the fire guy. Fire and ice, fire and water, And so when he first confronts him, first thing Captain Cold does is he tries to make a deal. Because again, this Captain Cold, he's not so much of a killer, if I remember right. And again, if he can make a deal and get out of this, all he wants to do is get his time served and get away. But instead of making a deal, Agni sets Captain Cold's park on fire. It looks like it's a bit of a discrepancy here, I'm going to say. It could just be between the scenes actions, but here at the bottom of page 16, Agni sets Cold's park on fire, whatever you call it, his jacket. Next panel over, he's removing it. You can see the flaming up. He's trying to pull it off. Next page, there's fire at the bottom of the stairs, and something's burning there, but it looks like he still has his park or whatever on. The only explanation I have for this is either A, he beat it off, the fire off in the middle between panels, put his cloak back on, or his cloak, but his jacket back on, or he's got a shirt underneath his parka that looked exactly like it. I'm not sure which it is, but something happened there because he's pulling it off, and then the next thing we see, it looks like it's back on again. And again, just a very minor quibble with the artwork. And as they're fighting, Agnes throwing fire at him, and Captain Cold's like, "Want to play rough, Pelly? Okay, but I gotta tell you something. Hate is cold. Hell is cold. And sucker, I am Captain Cold." That's a really neat battle, and really neat, Like I said, for my minor quibble, I like the little fight between the two of them. You got Fire and Ice, which is just a classic elemental battle, if you will. So I thought it came out very good. And then we go to Shade fighting against the zombies. And his vest, even though it doesn't work on these people, he doesn't, you can't project images like you normally can. The force field is keeping them from hurting him. He gives them some feedback, which shorts out the little controllers for him. And he's wondering if this killed Koshi the Deathless, or if the guy's still alive, whoever this guy is. Again, I don't think we've seen him yet. We've seen him acting through other people. And then we get finishing the fight between Duchess and Manticore. And again, it's just a matter of... And it's a really cool fight. I mean, she flooded the tunnel they were in. They finally get out of that. And then she just starts picking him up and wiping the floor with him. And then finally, here at the end, she rips his tail off and beats the tar out of him and kills him. I'm assuming he kills him. And as she walks away, she's like, "Now you were interesting." Well, it just goes to show that, she, even though she doesn't know who she is at this point, or so she's telling us, she's very much of a warrior. And this is something that's ingrained in her. But again, it's like I say, it was a couple-page fight. It lasted 2 pages, page and a half, I guess, before she finally rips the tail off and kills him with it. And then we move on to Vixen and fighting Badab. And she's sitting there, Badad's standing over Vixen, who's kneeling. She's laughing, kind of, again, the old Joker ha 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 laugh. And as she's doing so, like a black splotch opens behind her. And we get Nightshade saying, "This is darkness, little girl. As cold as the grave. A coldness to bury you. Why don't you laugh?" And then Nightshade comes out of the floor, out of the shadows, and just knocks the child out. And they're standing there, and Vixen's like, "Nightshade? What is that, child?" And Nightshade's like, "I fear she's the future." So again, another short-lived battle. Again, Badad was taking out Vixen until Nightshade showed up, and again, this little girl thinks that she's, evil's cool, and Nightshade shows up to show her what true darkness actually is. And it scares and startles the little girl enough that Nightshade can take her out. And then we cut back to Mindboggler and Boomerang talking, and Boomerang's all, "Look, you gotta remember back when you was Mindboggler. We were mates. Would I lie to you?" And Mindboggler's, "Yes, you are lying. They showed me tapes, surveillance cameras. How you could have saved me but let me die. Lies, they edited me in. Swear on my father's grave." And then she's about ready to kill him. Rick Flag shows up, and he's got the device that captures her and pulled her back in and saves Captain Boomerang. And I like how Captain Boomerang's on the ground. He's got, sweat pouring off his face, and he's like, "Lies, edited me in. I swear on my father." He's kind of excuses and lying about what actually happened, which I think is, it's pretty cool. It reminds me of the Blues Brothers, the scene with Carrie Fisher confronts Jake, I think it is, the John Belushi character, and he drops down. He starts coming up with all these excuses of why he didn't make it to their wedding. It kind of reminds me of that.
Oh, please don't kill us. Please don't kill us. You know I love you, baby. I wouldn't leave you. It wasn't my fault.
You miserable slug. You think you can talk your way out of this? You betrayed me.
No, I didn't. Honest. I ran out of gas. I had a flat tire. I didn't have enough money for cab fare. My tux didn't come back from the cleaners. An old friend came in from out of town. Someone stole my car. There was an earthquake. A terrible flood.
which makes me chuckle every time I see that. It's classic Captain Boomerang. He's not a great fighter. He's very much of a coward, very much trying to lie his way and weasel his way out of the situation. And again, the next page ends the story, and they get a recap that, Jakuli's dead. Captain Cold made a ice cube out of his. And Captain Boomerang, he's sitting there behind Detch on the ground. He's looking kind of dejected. I don't know if it's just he's upset that he froze this guy and the guy may be dead, or that the fire guy was getting the best of him at first. I'm not quite sure why Boomerangs seem so dejected. And then we get Nightshade saying that Dutch has killed the Manticore, Vixen and her have a prisoner. Then we hear from Bronze Tiger saying he has a prisoner and maybe a new recruit. And then we get the very last couple of panels here is Captain Boomerang telling Flag, "Colonel, mi hero, you came back for me. You saved my life." It's almost Irish than Australian, but my accents are horrible. And Flag's just like, "I came back to get Ifrit. Lost trust in the river, got his coat though, found the device. Ifrit may be useful for reprogrammer. You, Boomerang, you're just a dead loss." So I thought that was very interesting. Boomerang's thinking, he's like, "Hey, you saved my life," and Flag's like, "No, you're dead weight. You're just, worse than useless. I'm just here to take Ifrit because I might be able to use her. You're just unusable." So I thought that was interesting. But that's going to end this issue. And again, another great issue, as usual. Oh, what do you guys think? Have you guys read this issue? Email me, let me know what you think. But for right now, we're going to go take another quick break here for some more podcasting friends. And then we'll be right back, and I'm going to do a couple more character profiles before we start our final issue. Hold tight, kids.
We'll be back after this break. Don't touch that dial, for goodness sake.
Oh, hello. We didn't see you there. Welcome to Comic Book Fight Club. My name is Jiff S. Fishman, Esquire.
And I am Gene Theodore Hendricks.
Here at Comic Book Fight Club, we sit fireside, sipping our brandy, and discussing who would win in a bout of fisticuffs with other members of the comic book Illuminati.
Yes, you caught us at a good time, as Kevin Smith, Stan Lee, and the late Bob Kane just went on a beer and nacho run.
Have you ever wondered who would be victorious in a bout? Galactus or Unicron? How about the Incredible Hulk versus the Monster Doomsday? What about G.I. Joe versus the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., or the equally important bout of the Snorks versus the Smurfs? And of course, the Titanic duel between Archie and Jimmy Olsen.
And you can expect the intelligent and erudite debates to sound something like this.
But I always thought Transformers fans were intelligent and literate, so they should see that Galactus has to be the winner.
Like, he's hungry. Oh, I'm so hungry. I'm going to get weaker, and Reed Richards is going to be able to beat me.
I don't know anything about Rob other than he was defeated by Parker Brothers.
Oh, back to one of Sean's points, saying he got out of the Sarlacc. Every time he's gotten out of that in any story, he has to get put back in it because he's a bitch.
Oh my God! Oh my God! No! I tap out!
You are a sick man.
I'm not familiar with the last one. I might have to hit Google image search here.
So won't you join us for some witty discourse, a fine snuff, and a tincture of sherry, as we debate over these all-important matters, here, only on Comic Book Fight Club.
You can find the show at twotruefreaks.com and on iTunes by searching for Comic Book Fight Club. Please also join us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/comicbookfightclub.
Trekker Talk, a fan podcast devoted to the adventures of 23rd century bounty hunter Mercy St. Clair from the pages of Trekker Comics by creator, writer, and artist Ron Randall. I'm Darren.
And I'm Ruth. We'll be discussing the stories, characters, and art in this excellent retro sci-fi adventure series, as well as having side conversations about other areas of fandom.
We hope you will join us as we travel from the dangerous back streets of New Galuf to the depths of outer space and everywhere in between.
Trekker Talk is available at podbean.com and on iTunes and Stitcher.
Here we go back to the show. That's the fact, so now you know.
And now we're back with our next character profile. This time around, we're going to profile Ravan. Still not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. But anyways, he first appeared in Suicide Squad #1 in May of 1987. So if you've been listening to the show from the beginning, you would have heard about his first appearance. Created by John Ostrander and Luke McDonnell. His in-story information, team affiliation is Suicide Squad, the Jihad, and spoilers for end of the series, last issue of the series. His team affiliation is also with the Black Lantern Corps. Abilities, a professional martial artist. Publication history, not very much, as it's only been the last year and a half. He first appears as a member of the villainous mercenary team named Jihad. Renamed to Onslaught later on. We haven't gotten to that yet. Hold tight. In an encounter with the Bronze Tiger, his back was broken. He reappears alongside the Onslaught and Suicide Squad Volume 1, number 17, which is last issue, and is recruited for the Suicide Squad in a second encounter with the Bronze Tiger, which we cover this issue. A fictional character biography, part of the Thug cult. Ravan tries to stop the coming of Kali, and thereby the Kali Yuga, the Age of Chaos. By killing, he delays the coming of Kali another 1,000 years. It is through this practice that he both prevents and worships Kali. In this, his primary enemy is the villain Cobra, who wishes to bring forth the same age. Ravan joins the Suicide Squad so he can continue these efforts while actually being sponsored by the American government. And that's it for Ravan. Again, he's got a little bit more going on, but we're not going to cover that until we actually cover it in the show. I don't want to spoil too much for you guys. So we move on to a third character profile. This time around, we're talking about Manhunter. There's been several different Manhunters. We're only concerned with the Mark Shaw version, which first appeared in first issue special number 5. He was created by Jack Kirby. His alter ego, as I said, is Mark Shaw. His team affiliation is the Suicide Squad, notable aliases, the Privateer, and Starzar. And we talked a little bit about him back when we first encountered him during Millennium, I believe it was. A little of his backstory. Mark Shaw was a public defender, unhappy about how easily criminals manipulated the system and got off without punishment. Shaw's uncle Desmond introduced him to an ancient sect of crime fighters called the Manhunters. Shaw contacted the Grandmaster, the sect's leader, through a magical lion medallion. Shortly, he assumed the Manhunter name and the costume from a previous Manhunter. The Manhunter sect was composed of androids, created billions of years before the Guardians of Oa to police the galaxy. For millennia, they served the Guardians well. The Manhunters became obsessed with the act of hunting criminals. Their code, "No man escapes the Manhunters," became more important to them than seeing justice done. Eventually, the androids rebelled against the Guardians, but they were swiftly defeated by their creators. Those who survived went into hiding. The later day Manhunters attempted to disgrace the Guardians with Mark Shaw at their side. They were opposed by the Justice League of America, especially by Justice League member Green Lantern. Shaw realized that he had been duped by the Manhunters and turned on them, killing the Grandmaster, who was revealed to be a robot. Mark Shaw quickly returned as a new hero called the Privateer, but soon revealed that he was also working as a villain called the Zarzar in League of the Key. The Red Tornado discovered the deception, and Mark Shaw went to prison. While in the midst of serving his sentence, Shaw was offered the chance to accompany the Suicide Squad on a mission as a privateer, and was released when the mission was completed, as we talked about back during the Millennium issues of Suicide Squad. In the wake of the Millennium Crisis, he donned a new costume to distance himself from the Manhunter cult and had his own adventures. Shaw now hunted criminals for the bounty. He kept insisting that it was just operating for the money, but he kept finding himself doing the right thing, as we're discovering over on the Starman Manhunter Adventure Hour, another podcast from the Headcast Network. If you haven't listened, check it out. In other media, David Cubbett portrays Mark Shaw on Arrow. He was in a third season episode entitled Cordo Maltese, who is a liaison with Argus agent to Cordos Maltese, who has gone off the grid as unreachable. And that's all that Wikipedia shows for other media appearances. And that is our character profile on Mark Shaw, Manhunter. At this point, let's go ahead and move on to our final story, the Suicide Squad Annual number 1. It was entitled Ghosts and Shadows. It came out in 1988 with the cover date. Again, since it was an annual, it was just a vague 1988 cover date. To buy this off the newsstand, it had to be around on August the 16th of 1988. August the 16th. I was, what was I doing? I was starting college, or getting ready to start college about that time. I went to Merced Junior College for 1 year, and that was my first time, when I went. So it was around that time. Before I go further with the credits on this, I will make a little note here. This annual came out around the same time as issue 19, or right after issue 19. I moved it up just a little bit. I don't think it really touches on the main arc any. Or at least the next issue, issue 19. But I want to move it up a little bit because this issue ties in directly with Manhunter number 6, which I covered. I actually just released it here a week or two ago over on the Starman Manhunter Adventure Hour. So if you want to see what led up to this issue, definitely check out episode 6 of the Starman Manhunter Adventure Hour, also available on the Headcast Network. And that, as I said, that issue leads directly into this issue, so I decided to push this up a little bit. But anyways, to continue on with the Suicide Squad Annual, the price on this was $1.50. The editor was still Robert Greenberger. The title was, as I said, Ghosts and Shadows. The writer, as usual, was John Ostrander. The penciler on this was Graham Nolan. Inker was Timothy Bazan. Letterer Todd Klein. And the colorist was Carl Gafford. And now for my lengthy recap of this issue. And again, this issue had 2 stories in it. This is the first story was the main story that took up the bulk of the annual. First, we get a recap of Task Force X's origin. The JSA is forced to retire due to Senator McCarthy. See Secret Origins number 14 or episode 4 of our show. From the ashes, Task Force X is born. Military side is the Suicide Squad, which was under Jeb, that's J.E.B. Stewart, who is famous for Jeb Stewart and the Haunted Tank or something like that, some war stories. And the civilian side was known as Argent, under a man known as Control. After John Kennedy was assassinated, Control confronted the CIA director and got him to admit to trying to assassinate neighboring heads of state, which caused them in turn to assassinate JFK, thinking he was involved. One of Control's men kills Martin, the head of the CIA, and then we learn that Control went underground to better protect America, in quotes. We find out that Amanda is actually telling the origins to the team. The team is then introduced to Anne-Marie Veer. As I said at the top of the episode, or top of this issue, see Manhunter number 6 for more information on her, who tells the team that her grandfather picked a man for her to marry, so she ran away, so she didn't have to marry him. Mark learned that she was part of Argent, that's Mark Shaw Manhunter. She learned that she was part of Argent and brought her to the Suicide Squad. She says that their recent issues in Suicide Squads 5 through 7, issue 13, and then the Suicide Squad Doom Patrol Special convinced her grandfather that the squad couldn't be trusted. Anne-Marie tells the squad that Control is based in a college a little north of San Francisco, California, at a college called Peterson State College. And again, me popping in real quick, I didn't really care back when I first read this, but at this point I was curious, so I figured I'd look it up and see on the internet Peterson State College doesn't appear to be a real college that I could find on the internet. If someone has any different information, please let me know. Back to the story. Amanda says that the squad is going to investigate further and take out Control. When Nightshade says that she's not going to murder someone, the wall tells her that she has a different mission for her and Nemesis. Amanda confers with Rick, and they both agree that they don't trust Anna Marie's story, but the only way to prove it is by going in and forcing their way out if need be. And they're going to do it at night. Amanda thinks how Rick has gotten harder and something in him has died. And this is a reference to, again, back to the Millennium issues of Suicide Squad, when Rick's true love, if you will, Karen Grace, died destroying the Manhunter Temple. The team then infiltrates the college to investigate. Bronze Tiger, Shade, and Duchess act as surveyors, while Mark Shaw, aka Manhunter, and Vixen act as government flunkies, claiming the college needs to admit more minorities. The two teams converge in Mr. Beamer's office, who's the dean. Both Vixen and Shade begin to wonder where Boomerang is, as apparently he told each team that he was with the other two. Elsewhere on campus, Boomerang is acting the part of photographer for an adult magazine, when security stops him and brings him to the dean's office. The dean ends up kicking all three groups out of his office, who then reconvene with Flag on the plane. Bronze Tiger's team planted bugs, while Shade was able to use his tech to search and find a huge underground chamber and a power source. Flag announces they are going in tonight, but first, he punches Boomerang and tells him to stick to the mission, and then he can screw around on his own time. Rick reports back to Waller that they're launching the mission at 2300 hours. Waller says that she has to go to Washington for a meeting, but Anne-Marie should wait there at Bel Rev. And Anne-Marie agrees that she feels much safer there. 5 minutes before 11, the team has gathered and is ready to launch their attack. As the team goes in, Waller leaves Bel Rev to head to Washington, so she can meet up with Tolliver, who we've talked about previously. And we find that someone is spying on Amanda as she leaves. The team, meanwhile, finds a large underground chamber back at the college, then back at Bel Rev. Again, the story's switching back and forth between a couple different points of view. Back at Bel Rev, 3 men bust in on Anne-Marie at gunpoint. Back at the campus, the squad is having too easy of a time breaking in as they don't see any foot soldiers as they would expect. Finally, when they find some men to knock out, Vixen recognizes their caution as Cobra. No, not that Cobra. Cobra with a K from, big in Batman, the Outsider comics, I believe. DC has his own Cobra with a K instead of C. Meanwhile, back in Louisiana, Waller finds her car blocked by a fallen tree. As she gets out to investigate, her body is suddenly riddled with bullets, and Anne-Marie comes walking up saying it's done. Time to go home. The attack at the campus continues as Waller manages to stand up and get back to her car, where it's revealed that she is actually Nemesis in disguise. Luckily, he had enough Kevlar padding to protect him. Because, she's a big lady. Anyways, Waller tells him to come on back home and to get white again. Anne-Marie and a bunch of her men are starting to get airborne with an unexpected visitor, Nightshade, hiding in the shadows. Flag tells the team to abort, and after the team is loaded up, it makes a VTOL escape. It's VTOL. Bird will take off and landing, I believe it is. Anyways, they take off in the jet. Flag tells the team that this mission was a feint to draw off their enemy's fire, which seemed to have worked. After reassuring Tiger that Waller was fine, he informs them that Nightshade is hiding amongst the enemy, and if they hustle, they should be able to catch up. In London, the team storms Anne-Marie's stronghold, and everyone, except for Anne-Marie, finds out that Control is dead and has been for a while, about 5 years. I say everyone because Anne-Marie she's known Control's dead, and she's been perpetrating that Control's still alive for the last 5 years. Anne-Marie breaks down and says that she had to keep the charade alive, as the team wouldn't listen to a measly woman. We find out that this is the last of Argent, and with Control dead, the group is no more. the end of this story. And now before I cover the second story, let's go ahead and talk about the first story. We start off the cover as usual. We get Suicide Squad, annual, and big letters on the cover. We get a little extra blurb on the side, extra feature, Private Lives, which is the secondary story I'm going to cover in a few minutes here. Also, it gives a splash, revealed at last, Secret of Argent, guest starring Manhunter. And on the cover, we see Manhunter, Captain Boomerang, I believe that's supposed to be Duchess, fighting with a bunch of Cobra agents. You see Bronze Tiger in the background. Vixen's leaping down from above somewhere, knocking a soldier out. Again, it's a nice cover. I mean, it tells us, what's going on. That I think I don't know if it kind of spoils, but it lets us know that they're going to be fighting Cobra later in the story. I don't know if we consider that spoilers. I didn't pick up on it, but then again, I was a bit of an idiot when I was a kid, so I say a kid, I was a teenager. I wasn't a teenager. Well, I was, but I was like 18 when this came out. Down the bottom corner where the sometimes the price box go, whatever, we got Amanda Waller's headshot in there. Again, overall, I like this cover. It's a very nice cover. Again, there's no background on this one, but I don't think it needed just the blackness of the nighttime, I guess. But I think it's busy enough with all of with the Suicide Squad members we see fighting all these Cobra Troopers. So, again, it's a nice cover. I like it. Onto the story itself, we get a recap of what we talked about, like I said, over in Secret Origins number 14, episode 4 of my show. And I know this was covered somewhere else. I don't remember if it was America versus the JSA or if it was another series somewhere. But we see the JSA disbanding themselves, basically. Again, from that storyline, the Mystery Men, the JSA, they were convened in front of McCarthy and the House of Ethical Committees or whatever it is, on American Activities or something like that. This page we have Dr. Midnight, the Golden Age Flash, Black Canary, Hawkman, and the Golden Age Green Lantern sitting around the table. We got some people behind them. And basically the committee wanted the JSA to unmask themselves and tell everyone who they really are. They feel it best that way. Otherwise they may be communists, who knows. And again, this was back in the 50s when communism was a big fear. There's a lot of fear-mongering going on over commies. So, and instead of doing that, the JSA decides to resign, and if I remember right in the original story, the Spectre makes them all poof out of the room, and they go into hiding. Again, as we go on, so we find out, as I talked about in the synopsis, we hear a little more of a background on Control. This goes a little bit more, veers off and gives a little more detail on Control. At this point, we find out why, because I believe in the Secret Origins, they talk about, that after the JSA disappears, they created Task Force X and Argent. It went on for a little while, and then Argent disappeared. And Control also. And we find out here why. It tells us, November 22nd, 1963, Dallas, when someone assassinates Kennedy. And again, a lot of people, I've heard some other podcasters complain, and I've heard movie reviewers and other people complain, when you take a real life situation and throw it into a comic book. So some people may not like the fact of throwing JFK's assassination in to a comic book story and equating it to giving, blaming it on superheroes and supervillains. Me personally, I'm fine with it. I like it. I like it as a touch of realism, if you will. And I know I'm a big one that says, I don't want to hear about realism in my comics. That's a different issue. When they give that real world feel, they give us, Kennedy, that's his name. Kennedy being assassinated, and they incorporate it in the story. I think it works out rather well. And this isn't the first time, and I'm sure, and I know it's not going to be the last time that comics tackles Kennedy's assassination. As I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Shade, the Peter Milligan Vertigo Shade series, the first issues of that, if I remember right, dealt with the Kennedy assassination. Again, and in real world, I know there's conspiracy theorists that says, maybe not conspiracy theorists, maybe who knows what really happened. Was it just Oswald from the book depository? Was there someone in the grassy knoll? Was there a conspiracy? We may never really know what happened, who was actually behind Kennedy. For all intents and purposes of the story, there was other people behind it. Again, Control faces down with what's his name again? William Martin. There it is. William Martin in charge of the FBI, or sorry, the CIA director. And they're sitting there talking, and Control says he's found some files, talks about the death of JFK. As he's reading it, Martin's like, oh my God, this indicates the assassination was sponsored by... And they don't actually say. Control pops in and says, a small hostile neighboring country, which implicates, by extension, the superpower sponsoring that country. Yes. And a lot of people feel that it was Cuba was behind the assassination, or that was one of the players behind it. Some feel it was the American government. There's a whole bunch of different theories out there. To me, I think they're saying, without actually saying, Cobra, Cuba was behind, according to the storyline anyways, the assassination of Kennedy. And Control goes on to say that they blame the president for assassination attempts on their premier. There's more than one assassin. Oswald just one we caught. And Martin asked, how sure are you of this data? And Control says, very. We paid enough with my people's blood. And he wants to take it to the Warren Commission. And Control's telling him, no, we can't do that because it could basically set the stage for World War III. Back in the 60s, we were in the middle of the Cold War with Russia. Cuba was our neighboring country. And then the superpower backing them was Russia. If I don't have my facts incorrect. So again, if we were to attack and blame Cuba for this, and if the American public found out that Cuba actually was involved, Control's afraid that it would bring about World War III, which it very well could have. And as they talk, we find out that Martin was actually behind some assassination attempts on the head of state of Cuba. And William says, the attempts were justified. Affairs weren't my fault. In fact, he goes on to say that if he would have succeeded, he would have been a hero of a generation. And Control's got his back to Martin at this time, so he doesn't see what's going on. Martin's pulled a gun out from under his desk, and he's got ready to shoot Control to keep Control from blabbing that he was responsible for... Basically, Martin was responsible for the assassination of Kennedy roundabout way. And one of Control's men comes out with a garrote, that's how you pronounce it, and chokes the life out of it. I like this panel here on the top of page 7 where this guy, I don't think they say his name, they show Control, and then shadows, we see this guy, red hair, mustache, just choking the life out of it. It's all him choking the CIA director is done in shadow, so you don't see anything other than, the big guy with the CIA director going, and this way they say that how they went underground, and we see that they're destroying all their files, or destroying any trace of them. We see a bomb exploding, a file room looks like. And so finally on page 8 we find out that this is Amanda Waller telling the team about the origins of Argent, if you will. And when they're asked, they're like, looks like Shade's saying, well, since then no one's heard about them. And Shade's like, even if the primitive devices in the Earth Zone, I would have thought. Waller's like, whispers, rumors, usually at the highest level of government. The government didn't have to explain about Argent, and Argent didn't feel like advertising a sort of unspoken agreements. And again, there's a little bickering back and forth between, not bickering, but commentary between Boomerang and Vixen. Boomerang's like, who bloody cares? It's all ancient history, isn't it? And Vixen's like, and here I thought ancient history was your best subject in reform school. Lots of yucks at with you, you flaming chromo. And then Waller pops in, it's current events down under. What our source for this information says is true. You see, Argent has decided that the latest threat to the world peace is us. And then Rick asks where they got this information from, and this is where we at Suicide Squad, under the Task Force X podcast, is introduced to Anne-Marie Greer. If you listen to my other podcasts, over on the Starman Manhunter Adventure Hour, my last episode, I introduced her over there. She's this, as my podcasting buddy Shag, or aka the Irredeemable Shag would say, she's hot. It's blonde, curly hair, short skirt, and a, what is this, a halter top, I believe it's called, off the shoulder, red little long sleeve shirt or whatever it is. I don't know the stash. All I know is that, like I say, she's pretty hot in this. Where I see her. But that's another story entirely. And Anne-Marie says, her grandfather was going to make her marry some guy that she didn't want to. And Nightshade's like, your grandfather was arranging your marriage? What century is this? And Anne-Marie says it's the only way to join is either to be born into it or to marry into it. That way they can make sure they're not infiltrated. And Anne-Marie goes on to say that, well, everyone trusts him. He has a real-world view and has never acted needlessly. And he thinks, Control thinks the squad is effective, but the Rips, as I said, their trips to Russia and Nicaragua made things tense, and at that point, Control figured that it can't be trusted. And again, the trips to Russia and Nicaragua refers to Suicide Squad 5 through 7 and issues 13 where they went to Russia. And then in the Suicide Squad Doom Patrol Special number 1, I covered that with friend of the show Hicks. They went to Nicaragua. And that's where we had the Hawk show up and that whole mess. So I like when they're referring back to these other issues. And Shade pops off and says, well, it seems to be the smart way to destroy this group would be to expose it. And Anne-Marie says her grandfather isn't so certain of that. And again, I've already covered this in the synopsis, but at this point, we don't know this in the story, but we do since I covered the synopsis of it. Anne-Marie's actually in charge of Control, so whenever she talks about her grandfather, or that his grandfather is certain of this, she's referring to herself, and we can only assume that the whole thing about that she has to marry some guy that her grandfather wanted her to, that was all set up to get her close to the Suicide Squad, so Argent takes it down. And like I said, the story continues. I talked about in the synopsis. Again, we get to Nightshade where she's telling him, it's murder, it's not easy. So basically, Nightshade's not wanting to murder people just because an Admiral says so. And she says, I've got something else planned for you and Nemesis. Advanced team mission. And she dismisses the group, so she talked with Colonel Flag. And as Shade's leaving, he has a thought. He's like, I'm never getting back to Meta at this rate. Complaining to himself how, he agreed to help out the Suicide Squad if they can return to Meta, but at the rate they're going, he's never going to get back. And as Rick and Amanda are talking, both Shade and Boomerang are leaving. Boomerang's behind Shade, giving him a raspberry, putting his fingers in his ears, all. And the Invest acts up, and this big bald guy cuts his finger on his nose and sticks his tongue out at Boomerang. Making Boomerang jump back. Again, the artwork in this issue it's not our regular artist, but it's good art. I enjoy it. It matches the rest of the series, so that's good. The only problem, I say in quotes, with this scene, and it's not so much a problem. It is, but it isn't. This scene is focusing on Amanda and Rick, so they're in the foreground. Shade and Boomerang are in the background, so it's a little hard to make them out. I mean, they're color coding, their basic design, you can see who's who, but it's a little hard to make out who they actually are if it wasn't for their costumes. And then Amanda refers to Rick being harder than he used to be, and that something in him died. And she's saying, if you're not careful, a few people die along the way with you. Well, for one, they're the Suicide Squad, that's their job. For another, we know that, again, she's referring to Karen Grace dying back in issue 10, I believe it was, when we had the Millennium crossover. Or maybe it was 9. Actually, I think it was 9. We had the Millennium crossover, and Karen sacrificed herself to destroy the Manhunter Temple. And then, like I said, we continue off the story that I talked about, where you got the two different teams, which ends up being three different teams. And I like this on page 13. The two teams are in the office. You got the surveyors. You got this committee trying to get the team, the college to be more racially sensitive, if you will. And they're sitting there talking, and I believe it's Bronze Tiger from the way his hair looks, the way he leaned over the desk. He's talking to the dean, telling him that, this U.S. government's. And we got Shade and Vixen in the background talking to each other. They're like, Shade's like, where's Captain Boomerang? Vixen's like, he told us he was supposed to be with you. Shade's, he told us he was going to be with you. They're both like, where's Boomerang? I'm like, again, it's a serious moment, it's a serious issue, but part of why I love Ostrander is he's able to tweak and add these little humor moments into this serious issue and these serious storylines. I mean, this book is no way a comedy. It's not the Just League International, which, plug real quick, you can hear about over on the JLI Wahaha podcast by a friend of the show, The Irredeemable Shag. But, again, this is a serious book, but Ostrander, the master he is able to fit in some, a little romance, a little humor, and he makes it work. And then we get Captain Boomerang, and again, he's posing as a sleazy photographer for what I would assume is an adult magazine. Again, he doesn't really say the name of the magazine, but he's doing a pictorial called The Girls of the Colts. Very tasteful. They pay one fee for topless, more if it's an all together. And as he's talking, the security guard walks up and is like, excuse me, buddy. And I have to say, if anyone on the team can play the part of a sleazy photojournalist, Captain Boomerang is the man. He's very much got that personality already. I just love that scene. And so they're all three groups are in the dean's office, going off at one time. Boomerang's complaining about his constitutional freedoms. Bronze Tiger's complaining about a job to do. Vixen's talking about the school rules. And the dean just loses his mind and says, I've had enough. The school's a private institution. We don't want to be bullied. If you ever wish to infringe on us, they better have a court order. And we don't allow your company's magazine on campus and have no intention of letting you in here either. Now get out, all of you. And one of his aides, the security guy, I guess, that picked up Boomerang says, odd, this many strangers turning up at one time. Yes, we'll take it up to the master when he arrives tonight. And again, the squad didn't catch that, and I didn't think about it. I was wondering what it meant by master. I was thinking like a headmaster or something. But what we find out later, how Cobra is running this place, or it's a front for Cobra or whatever. I'm assuming they mean Cobra Master, not Cobra Commander. Again, wrong Cobra. So, again, I didn't pick up on that. In fact, I just now picked up on that as I'm rereading it again right now. When I reread it prior to this, for this episode, I didn't even pick up on Master and Cobra. I was thinking Headmaster. But as I'm reading this now, on page 14 there, he says he's still thinking of the Master. I just now, again, I'm a little slow apparently on the uptake. I realize they're referring to Master, the guy in charge of Cobra. Huh. Anyway, now the whole purpose of the whole thing was to plant some bugs on them and to get a reading of the campus. And Shade says that the grass over the quadrangle is artificial. There's a large cabin below it. And there at the bottom of this, they're talking a little about, on page 15. And then here in the middle of the page, we get, I believe that's Mark Shaw talking to Shade. And he's asking, nice toy, like to sell it? And Shade's all, it's been a technology, a little beyond you, I think. And you can just see that even though it's a smallish panel and they're in the background, so you can't get a good look. The artist on this does an excellent job of showing how Manhunter is kind of annoyed and upset that he's being, talked to, because while Manhunter's not a master electronics guy, he did modify his baton, as we find out he talks about over on his Manhunter book, so he knows a little about technology. So to be rebuked by Shade, like, it's beyond you, puny human. It kind of annoys him. And we'll come back to this a little later on. And then again after that, Flag walks up and he's like, we're going tonight. But first, and he just punches Boomerang in the gut. He's like, one of the Boomerang's laying on the ground, just he's like, one last thing. You want to screw around, you do it in your time. You're on a mission. You stick to the mission. Got it? And I see Sam kind of chuckling at, Boomerang laying there on the ground, holding his stomach. And then we get a close-up shot of Boomerang. And, oh yeah, I won't forget in a hurry, Colonel, sir. And you can see that there's, I don't know, maybe it's me looking into it too much, but I don't think so. You get a look on Boomerang's face like, when he says he won't forget, he means he won't forget and he plans on getting back at Flag at some point. Because he's got, if, as they say, if looks could kill, Flag would be dead on the spot. Boomerang's got this murderous look in his eye. And Flag doesn't really care what Boomerang's thinking. He's just like, see that you don't. And then the next page picks up where I was talking about how it's 22:55, which is 5 minutes before 11. And we got the team gathered outside the college. We got Manhunter, Shade, Flag, Duchess, Boomerang, Ron's Tiger, and Vixen. And it's a nice comic book panel. My only question is, everyone's getting in action pose, ready to move. Flag's up against the tree. Duchess has her gun. Boomerang's hiding in the back. Ron's Tiger look like he's getting a weapon ready. On the other side of the tree, we got Manhunter getting his staff together, and Shade's kind of by the tree, can't really see him. And then we get Vixen. She's crouched down, her legs spread out. I don't quite know what this move, this thing she's doing is. I don't know if she's getting ready to leap into action. We caught her mid-leap or what, but it's just all complaints about, sexism in comics and, and again, I'm not one to complain about hot chicks doing anything hot, because that's who I am, but I could see people getting upset by this panel with the way Vixen is. I see she's got one hand on a tree branch, it looks like. She's got a fist cocked back. She's kind of bent over, her legs sticking out. This one image of Vixen, again, why I love the artwork in the book. It very much fits with the regular book. This one image of Vixen can be taken very sexist and very, very much objectifying of women. And again, I don't really comment on things like that, but I just saw that and it just struck out at me the way she's posed there. And then at the bottom of page 17, we got Manhunter and Shade talking. And Shade's like, what's this? And Manhunter tells us that it's a power baton modulator pieces. Then it's the original piece given by the cult, the Manhunter cult he was part of. He's added pieces here and there, does different things. And Shade's like, fascinating. I'd love to examine it later. And a call back to earlier, as I mentioned, watch out for here it comes. Manhunter's like, sorry, mostly alien technology. I don't think you'd understand it. He walks away. Back to when he was inquiring about Shade's device, and he's like, it's technology you wouldn't understand. And again, this vest is pumping up his image like, you dirty rotten. It's a great scene here. In fact, if I don't forget, I'll post this on the website, on the blog, because it's a great image. A great little scene here. It's basically Mark getting back at Shade for his comment earlier about how he wouldn't understand his technology. So he's like, it's alien technology. You wouldn't understand it. And see, this is part of why I love the Suicide Squad, is the humor. It's not over the top. It's not the JLI wahaha humor. It's a serious book. It's a serious storyline. But John Ostrander is able to slide in these humor bits and pieces in the book as needed. It's great. And then, as I talked about earlier, they begin the mission. And the mission, I like these next couple pages. The mission on the campus is interlaced with scenes from Bell Rev where Waller's leaving. And then we get one panel of someone saying she's left, inform Team 2. And then we see some images of the team breaking into the underground campus where they find a big empty area with a helicopter, and it's just a huge room. And then we're back where the three guys are breaking, as I mentioned earlier, into Bel Rev, and they bust open. At this point, not knowing what's going on, they kick the door open. Anne-Marie's looking at them. They have their guns out. Then we cut back to the campus where the Suicide Squad, and this is where they're noticing that there's no one around. Then we come back to Amanda Waller driving. She comes to a tree trunk, as I said, or a tree log, whatever, across the road. And then we get Ben and, that's the Bronze Tiger, and Vixen coming across some soldiers that realize they're Cobra. Again, as I said earlier, not G.I. Joe's Cobra, this Cobra the K. The DC version of the DC villain group. And then here on page 22, Amanda Waller gets shot down, I say in quotes. Like I said, this one looks like she gets killed. I mean, again, I bought this after the fact, so I knew she wasn't dead here. But reading this, I'm sure I would have been like, what the heck? And then as Anne-Marie comes out, she was looking kind of suspicious earlier. We find out that she's the one that killed, again, in quotes, killed Amanda Waller. We get a little more fight. Which, again, it's always a good scene. We get the fight going on. Here on page 23, here at the bottom, the lights go off, and Shade is fighting against a couple Cobra guys. And they, again, Shade's vest works. It takes your fears and it manifests it. So they're seeing a giant cobra with a bunch of little cobra snakes coming off of them. And Shade's wondering, why they're afraid of cobras if they dress in snake costumes. And again, the dialogue here, that one of the guys is saying, no, Lord Naga, no. So I don't think it's necessarily snakes they're afraid of. They're afraid of their Lord Naga, who, I forget if he's supposed to be a real person or if Lord Naga is a supernatural entity. Again, I'm not as up on this version of Cobra as I am on the G.I. Joe version. So I forget offhand if Lord Naga is... I thought Lord Naga was their ruler guy in charge of the Cobras, but if he's supposed to be a supernatural entity, that could be why they think they're seeing Cobra or Lord Naga and why they're in such fear. And then back on page 24, we see Amanda Waller getting up. She pulls herself up, and we have someone reporting into her, Bel Rev to Waller 1, you copy. And Waller, in quotes, like, goddamn high heels. And then she pulls back the mask, and we see that it's Nemesis in disguise. Yeah, I like this. They're like, Waller, we find out, it's like, Trezor, you okay? Bruised but breathing. They struck pretty much like you thought they would. Fortunately, I had enough Kevlar padding to stop a tank. No offense meant. Because, again, this was back the Waller I like, as I've said many times before. This is the heavy-set Waller. So, Trezor, being an average-sized guy, had to have a lot of padding, so he had a lot of Kevlar padding to help kind of protect him from the gunshots. And then Amanda's like, when he says no offense meant, she's like, none taken. Come home and get white again. I hope night she can do her part. Which leads to the next page. I think I like that comment there where she's like, come home and get white again. Makes me chuckle. And then we see that Anne-Marie and her men's on the airplane, and out of the shadow comes Nightshade. And here on the top of page 25, she's stashing something more than likely a receiver, a homing beacon, if you will. And again, we get a little more fights. Flag lands the plane on the airfield, or on the football field. And we find out that the SS-1, as they call it, their ship, has a new feature. It can vertically take off. And we find out that apparently Rick was in on the plan, but Bronze Tiger wasn't. Bronze Tiger's like, we got suckered. And Rick's like, not quite. Mrs. Waller figured this was a feint. They'll let you and him fight routine. She heard that the Argent really wanted to destroy the squad. They go after our number one irreplaceable member, her. And I like here on the top of page 28, the fear in Ben's face when he finds out that Waller was actually the target. He's like, she okay? Because again, as we've seen in previous episodes, if you listen to the previous episodes, in previous issues of this, Ben and Amanda have a bond, both being black people at this time of when the stories came out, the late 80s, that kind of bonded them together. Waller wanted Ben to lead the squad, but she was stuck with red flags, we found out earlier on. So again, Ben's very concerned about Amanda Waller, and so he finds out that she's fine, though. As I said earlier, we get to London, where the squad breaks in, and Nightshade comes out of the room where Grandfather Control's at, and Nightshade's like, he's dead. Control's dead, Anne-Marie. And one of the guys that they capture is like, you killed him? So they think Nightshade killed him, and then she's like, no, he's been dead for at least 5 years. I don't know if she's a forensic scientist or what, but she's pretty good. She's, all we see here is a corpse, a skeleton basically, in clothes and a pipe hanging out of his mouth. Here on the bottom of page 29, I'm not going to complain about this because it's a superhero comic, but it's a funny book. But, I mean, Control's been sitting here for apparently 5 years. Anne-Marie didn't get rid of the body or anything. And in the last 5 years, it's been decomposing down to just the skeleton. And I'm looking at this one panel too much, with too much of a logical eye. I mean, you would think she would hide the body. The smell, at least over the last 5 years, would be getting somebody. You think it would smell the odor of the rotting corpse. Or maybe she's looked at a lot of air fresheners, I don't know, but I mean, his eyeballs have rotted out. There's nothing left but the skeleton and the clothes and the pipes, and that's the mouth's hanging open. The pipe's still just hanging there in the mouth. And I understand it's just for the shock effect of showing that instead of an empty room, we have the corpse laying there, but and still in the chair. I don't know. I just again, I didn't think much of this when I first read this. So many years ago, almost 20 years ago, I didn't really think much about this scene, this panel. But now that I'm 46, I actually think about these things a little bit more. It is a little comical, little WTF that, she would leave the corpse in the room for 5 years. I understand that, as she explains in the next panel, she had to make her think Control's still alive, even though she was running things because they wouldn't listen to her. But you would think that she would at least get rid of the corpse or something. I don't know. I spent way too much time talking and thinking about this, I think. So let's go ahead and move on. But that's just that scene. Again, I can't leave this page. We got the corpse here in front and center. Anne-Marie's on her knees crying. Nightshade's standing in the doorway, kind of like Columbo. I think I got an answer for you right here. He's dead. And the guy that they captured, he's got the shock look on his face. It's a great scene, don't get me wrong, but my minor complaints about the corpse. The scene itself is great. And then we see Anne-Marie laying on the floor crying. And then Dutch is like, we want to know what the rest of your organization is, what you guys going on. And this guy that was talking, he's like, we're it. What does he say? Yeah, we're it. We're all that's left. We were never outliers to begin with. Time and effort took their toll. Our reputation grew. Our numbers dwindled. Ghosts and shadows bound by one man's will, one man's vision. Our specialty was pitting one group, wish to joy against the other, as it did with you and Cobra's forces. But now it's over. You see, in a real sense, Control was Argent. And Control is gone. Control is gone. An era has ended. And we end with the corpse just sitting there again, the pipe hanging out of his open mouth. Again, I don't want to question this too much. It's a funny book, but how in the blazes is that pipe still hanging in the guy's mouth after 5 years with his mouth hanging open? But again, except for the minor quibble about the dead body in the room for 5 years and the pipe hanging out of his mouth, I really enjoyed this issue, or this story. The issue's not done yet. But this story, again, it ties into the Manhunter stories that's going on right now. And again, if you want to know more about that, definitely check out my Starman Manhunter Adventure Hour. Last episode 6, I believe it was, I covered issue 6, which led into this book. And I'm going to say this now, and I probably said it at the beginning. I'm also going to take this part of this episode and play it over on the Starman Manhunter show. So if you listen to both shows, you may get a bit of a recap, or not recap, but you may get the same episode playing. And then after this, on the Manhunter episode, I will review the next issue. So, but anyways, that's it for this part of the issue. If you're listening to this over on the Starman Manhunter show, or the Manhunter, try that again. If you're listening to this on the Starman Manhunter Adventure Hour, stay tuned. I'm going to probably play a commercial break, and we'll be right back with our next issue. And if you're listening to this over on the Task Force X, well, we're going to go ahead and continue on. So, the next story here is called Family Duty. Again, it's an 8-page story. This was, again, written by John Ostrander. The pencil was Keith Giffen. Inker is Robert Ostner. Letter Todd Klein. Color is Carl Gafford. Keith Giffen is big right now in this time frame for working on the Justice League International, the JLI book. You hear more about Keith over on the JLI Bwahaha podcast, put on by the friend of the show, the Irredeemable Shag. He was also at this time, I believe he was doing the Legion of Superheroes book, which was in the 5 years later storyline. So, just to give you a little bit of where Keith Giffen's at this point. Now for the synopsis on this story. Waller is leaving work to get a change of clothes before she actually heads out to D.C. We get a small flashback to Tolliver threatening to expose Amanda if the squad doesn't help Senator Craig get elected. Waller arrives home to find her daughter, Saritha, in her apartment. She tells the security guard that she's going to get him fired for letting Saritha in the apartment. Saritha tells her mom that her husband and her are on the outs, and he's a jerk, which is her words, which Waller knew before the wedding. As they're talking, the linebacker himself comes into the apartment also. Waller again calls Joe the security guard and tells him that she's going to find out. Try that again. Waller calls Joe the security guard and tells him that he's going to find out what else she can do to him for letting her son-in-law in without announcing him. Saritha tells her husband that she's leaving and moving in with her mother. Waller says, "No, I don't think so," and tells RJ that if he doesn't straighten up and treat Saritha right, Waller will quit her job, move in with them, and make his life miserable. And as she says, "And you know I can do it too." Saritha confirms that Amanda won't get Joe fired and leaves with her husband. Amanda thinks that Tolliver is dead meat. If she can deal with her family, she can deal with him. The end. Again, this is an 8-page story. It's Family Duty. As I said, written by the incomparable, the fabulous, the wonderful John Ostrander. Drawn by Keith Giffen. Keith Giffen, at this point, he had a very unique style. I think he did a lot of the writing he also drew, so that doesn't play much into this, but I know in the Legion books he does a lot of 9-page grids, real dark and gritty. On the Justice League International, he may just be writing that. I forget if he's doing the art on that right now or not. I know he's working on the Justice League book, but I forget right offhand. That's what I'd have to check if the Irredeemable Shag about, or look at my books. But anyways, but this artwork, again, it's Legion's artwork, that's where I was going with this. Legion of Superheroes artwork he's doing, it's very grim and gritty right now. It's very, not quite realistic as I call it, but it is the darker hues, the darker tones, the darker storytelling that fits into the Suicide Squad. So, and he's able to, I'm going to use the word mimic, but I don't mean he's copying us for style, but this story, as far as tonal-wise and art-wise, fits in with the main book perfectly. I mean, it's not like a jarring, you're getting Luke McDonald over on the main book, and then you're getting some lighter, fair, more four-color superhero stuff here. You're getting the same darker tones, the same art style that you're getting over on the main book. So I don't know if DC themselves asked Giffen to do this type of artwork in this, or if this was Keith's choice. But whoever made this decision, I think made a good decision on it. Again, I like Keith Giffen, his writing, his artwork. And again, here it fits perfect. So, but as I said, so we see this bell rev. Amanda's leaving. Again, we find out that she's going home to go up to DC, which ties into the main book. Like I said, this issue actually came out after issue 19, which I'll be reviewing next month. But to tie in with the Manhunter storyline, I moved this issue up a month. I don't think it's going to matter. We'll find out next month. In the scheme of things, that I did this a month early. But we'll find out. But anyway, so as she's leaving, she asks Murph, the guy that's on detail, where shorts.
And may the Schwartz be with you.
Sorry, wrong Schwartz. But she asks where Schwartz is at. And he's like, he's got relatives over, family duty. You know how it goes, I'm subbing for him. And we get a close-up of Amanda's face, which is something Giffen was really well known for at this time over the Legion book, as I mentioned. She's like, I do know how it goes. Schwartz better not be drunk again, and you better not be covering for him, or I'll ream both your butts. And she peels off. He's like, last time, Schwartz, last time. It's like the fact that Amanda's able to see through Murph and see that, he's lying and he's trying to cover his buddy. And she comes across as a hard butt, but she's actually, we'll find out, she's actually, I don't want to say a softie. I don't want to give the wrong impression of Amanda, but she's actually fair. So that's a good thing. Amanda's a tough but fair woman. So, and then basically this next page 2, is the story. She's recapping what's going on, and that Tolliver is blackmailing her and the squad into doing work for him. He wants to try to get Senator Joe Cray elected. He wants the squad to help him out. He tells them that if they don't, he's going to reveal the Suicide Squad to the public, which could destroy them. So it's just a recap of that, and that's why she's going to DC for to deal with Tolliver. And then you go to Amanda heading into her apartments, and she starts to unlock the door. She realizes that she put some matches in the doorway. And yeah, I've seen this before in different spy movies. They put matches or paper, string, something in the doorway. That way they know if someone's been in their place. So Amanda's a spy. She's very paranoid, which can help out sometimes. So she pulls her gun out, and she kicks the door open and draws on her daughter. Surprise, Mama. Saritha, how'd you get in here? Well, I told the security guard I was your daughter, and he let me in. Amanda calls the security guard. She's like, tell me, Joe, you married? Got any kids? Well, I sure hope you can support them all on deployment, because that's where you're going. How dare you let someone into my apartment? She is my daughter. I don't care. You couldn't know that for sure. Talking that way, I'll have his raggy butt fired. So Amanda, she loves her daughter, she loves her family, but she doesn't like the idea that anyone could get into her apartment by talking nice to the security guy. And his daughter's like, well, come on, Mama, he recognized me from your pictures. You're just trying to be nice. And Amanda complains how her daughter hasn't visited or called in a while, and she's like, well, you're not easy to get a hold of. Your brothers and sisters done it. You only heard how many times? And then we get a little talk. They talk about her husband, RJ, who apparently is not a very nice guy. She says he's a jerk, and Amanda's like, girl, I knew that before the wedding. And again, so they're talking, and we find out that he's a linebacker. Amanda calls him a professional Neanderthal. Because, he's very much, woman belongs in the kitchen, barefoot and pregnant. And Saritha is a very 80s woman. She wants to get out and have a life. And as they're talking, in comes RJ now. He's a big guy. Feels kind of like a black version of the Kingpin. He's like, Saritha, you come home now. And I imagine that's how he talks. Saritha, you come home now. And so he's standing there. Well, first he's like, where's my wife? And then he says, Saritha, come home. And as he's, Saritha standing up to him, Amanda's back on the phone. Joe, what the hell are you doing sending that man to my apartment unannounced? Yes, he is my son-in-law. Don't mean I want to see him. Yes, I am going to get your butt fired. So what else can I do to you? Oh, you're going to find out, mister. And Saritha says, I'm not going nowhere with you. I'm moving in with my mama. And it's like, hold the phone. You going to do what? Now, Mama, I got to go somewhere. I can't live with that man no more. He don't treat me right. Not living here. Saritha, I raised you, made sure you had a college education and a chance to make your own life. Now I'm making my own life, and I ain't got time for this kind of nonsense. Then again, as we found out in the Secret Origins 14 that I covered with Ryan Daly way back in the day, and also on my own show myself, Amanda, her husband died. She lost a couple of her kids. She had to get an education. She had to support her kids, and now that her kids are all grown and on their own, she's trying to have her own life. And so Amanda, she loves her kids, but she doesn't want her kids moving back in. She doesn't want to support them. Her kids are older and on their own. And so she tells, she's like, "Bull, you're having a spat this overgrown piece of beef jerky, and I ain't going to get drawn in." And RJ's like, "You can't talk about me that way. I'm a professional athlete." Amanda's like, "You'd be chump change you mess with me. Furthermore, if you don't straighten up and treat my little girl right, I will quit my job, move in with you, and devote the rest of my life to making your life miserable. And you know I can do it." And if you haven't seen this, RJ's got to be a good 2 foot taller than Amanda. On the picture, we get his, from his, just below his chest up to his head, and we see just the very tip top of Amanda's head looking up at him. And not only this is Keith Giffen's style to show close-ups of people, but it shows the size difference between Amanda and RJ. And again, like I said, and this is one reason why I like the shorter heavyweight Amanda compared to the supermodel Amanda we've had for the last couple of years, is that, I don't know, it just, to me, it seems different. She's a different person when she's this short heavyweight woman instead of a tall, voluptuous looking, hot black chick. I don't know, I love this version of Amanda, as I keep saying. And again, to show you, like I say, so she's 2 foot shorter than this, linebacker, and she's telling him what to do. And she's like, "Now the pair of you get out of here. I got me a plane to catch." And both Saritha and RJ's like, "Yes, mama." I just see big old RJ, "Yes, mama." And Saritha's like, "Mama, you won't really get that security guard fired, will you?" "Nah, probably not. Murphy just rehired him over Bell Rev anyways." And again, as a Task Force X fan, Bell Rev is where the Suicide Squad's based out of. Murph, as we saw earlier, is, he's easygoing security guard. And again, we end with an extreme close-up of Amanda's face and her thought balloon saying, "Tolliver, you're dead meat. If I can deal with my family, I can deal with anything you dish out." The end. And again, a nice little, like I say, you don't have to have this story. It doesn't progress the actual story any, but it gives a little behind the scenes of Amanda and her thought process. So again, it's another great story by John Ostrander. I loved it. Let me know what you guys think. Again, send me an email to taskforcex@headspeaks.com and let me know what you think. And finally, the letter column. I don't usually mention much about the letter column. This is talking about the Doom Patrol Suicide Squad special and some other stuff. A couple things I wanted to point out. There is comments in the letter column about the price increasing to $1 on the book. It went up from 75 cents to $1. A reader commented on the price change. And a couple of things I just wanted to point out. A fan wrote in asking about if Bolt's going to show up on here, and they say no, but look at the upcoming book Starman. Or maybe it's not upcoming at this point. But they were free to look over at the Starman book where Bolt appears. Again, if you're not familiar with other shows, I do have a Starman Manhunter Adventure Hour, and we recently talked about Bolt's appearance over in Starman. A great book, great issue, check it out. Then the editor mentions there's going to be an upcoming crossover between Checkmate and Suicide Squad, which is the upcoming Janus Directive I'll be covering here at some point, probably next year, I believe it is. Someone asked about Cronus. He shows up in the Power of the Atom they mentioned, which is a book I'm going to be covering over on my Head Speaks podcast. I'm currently covering the Sword of the Atom. Once I'm done with those 7 issues, I'll be talking about the Power of the Atom. Then there's also a mention about a crossover between Starman and Firestorm. Okay, so Atomic Bolt is turning up in Starman in just 2 weeks. We can't use him here. Cronus is back in the Power of the Atom. Speaking of crossovers, John and Power of the Atom writer Roger Stern are planning a doozy of a crossover between not Suicide Squad and Power of the Atom, but Firestorm and Starman, which I will be covering again here in a month or two over in my Starman and Manhunter Adventure Hour when we get to the Invasion crossover. So anyways, that's it for this book. Let me know what you guys think. And I'm just going to go and sign off here. I don't have any letters or anything thing really coming on this time. So again, if you guys want to write in, definitely send us an email to taskforcex@headspeaks.com, or you can check out the blog, the Facebook page. It can all be found under Task Force X. We're also over on Google+. Definitely check us out and let us know what you think. Until next time, squad mates dismissed.
Thank you for listening to another great episode of Task Force X. I can also be found rambling on my main headcast of Head Speaks, where I rant and rave about movies, comics, geek stuff, and whatever is bugging me.
Mate, you just out-crazied the Joker.
Well, I tried, Boomer, but anyways, my home on the internet is at headspeaks.com. HEADSPEAKS.com. Links to my blog, which contain follow-up information to this and every headcast, can be found there. Both Task Force X and Headspeaks are on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and at headspeaks.com under Headcasts. Please feel free to email me any questions, comments, or concerns to taskforcex@headspeaks.com. And if you want to record a message, you can send it to me at taskforcex@headspeaks.com, and I'll play it on the air. I'm also on Facebook at Task Force X, and also on Google+, you can look for Task Force X under People and Pages. All titles and characters discussed are owned and copyrighted by DC Comics. I claim no ownership to the Suicide Squad, Checkmate, or Task Force X. I'm just a big fan wanting to spread the Task Force X love with everyone else. DC Comics can be found on the web at dccomics.com. Be sure to visit your local comic shop and look for Suicide Squad and Checkmate Comics. And while you're there, see what else they have that may interest you.
Mother.
Well, make sure you join us here next time for another fun-filled headcast from your friendly neighborhood Brotherhead. In the meantime, I'll see you in the funny pages.
Yippee!